Okay, everyone, welcome to our user group meeting on August 15th. It's actually, we think, our 16th meeting, so we've been running these since November of 2015, right? So a little over, or almost 4 full years here. John's bringing up the slides. So today we really have a quite packed agenda. We have several customers here in the room. We also have Parag from McAfee and Steve from TDS. They've graciously, willingly have, they're going to present their experiences with RAR for about 30 minutes or so later in the presentation. So we really appreciate that. We have Cody, one of our authors, and for the customers that are here, Cody has graciously agreed to sign a book. So we're going to give you a RAR book as a takeaway that Cody has signed. So at least hopefully we'll answer some of your questions and at least have an introduction to Cody, because he's still working on the RAR consulting team, so he knows RAR quite well. We also have some other partners in the room. So we have Kent and VJ. We've got Dave's team from Bramasol, right? Whole Bramasol team. I want to thank Bramasol for sponsoring the Dallas office for hosting us, and Bramasol for hosting the webinar and catering the lunch. That's great. And with that, we have to figure out how we present here.
Press Windows key plus K.
And then close K. Just hold on, we're trying to work out a video protection room in the room here. We'll also have the product team, Martin and Petra, as well as Volkmar and Gerold present. They'll actually present first here in a few minutes, give you the latest update on RAR 1.3 and RAR 1909, which is planned for the second half of September. From a logistics standpoint, lunch will come here right after Steve's presentation, or right during it. Yeah. But it's not too late, which is good. So then if there's a little extra time, we'll break early for lunch and do a little more networking. If not, no worries. And then we'll have kind of a few minutes to grab lunch, and then we'll go right into the deep dive sessions with recording. We have some folks, Peter and Lara from our finance IT team joining us. They actually run RAR at SAP, and so I know reporting has been a big topic with customers, so we will have some updates on the reporting side, not only from Peter and Laura's perspective of our end users, but also Martin and Gerold and Volkmar and Petra will also have some feedback on some features and other improvements to reporting we're working on. Parag will then wrap it up with the presentation. Parag's actually helping John here at the moment. We'll get McAfee's kind of update and kind of where they are in their RAR journey, and then we'll have some time for questions and networking. So hopefully you'll get a lot of benefits and enjoy the session. Ask questions, I would say, along the way. There's nothing we can't answer. We'll put it on the parking lot and try to catch up at the end or follow up with you after the meeting. All right, so we got the visual item resolved. Let's go jump down to the agenda. Again, thanks for joining the user community. Go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so I mean, we're all here about revenue counter reporting. Again, to me, it's all about automating and simplify revenue accounting. That was the whole goal of RAR when it was started. And Martin was there in the beginning about, I guess it was about 9 years ago, I think, Martin, that you start working on RAR, and the premise is still the same in the sense that it's a rules-based and event-based system. The idea is really to automate your revenue accounting. We know it's difficult. Our own folks are using RAR, so we know this is not an easy area. But every couple months we have support packages coming out of improvements, and so anyway, that's the purpose of this user group, is to really communicate some of that information and try to start leveraging some of the other customers and experiences that are here in the room. If we go to the next slide, we'll see a little bit about the user group. We have about 800 in the community that are active. When we send out the meeting invite, we always send out the registration for the user community and also the meeting. Just keep that in mind, that you need to join the user community in the whole to get the invites, and then the meeting invites for meetings like today. Our next meeting, we are tentatively planning for October in the Bay Area. We have a customer there that's going to host. We're also looking at, due to popular request, do a user group meeting in Europe, right? So we have from folks checking out venues and possibilities for Europe, either in Q4 or Q1.
You need a speaker for that.
Huh?
You need a speaker.
If you need a speaker, okay. All right. I would suspect if we put the venue in Maui, Hawaii, we would get a lot of speakers. All right, so here's the official agenda. We're just wrapping up the intro. Again, let's, in the interest of time, because I know we're always time pressed, we'll jump right into Martin's presentation, and then Gerold will jump in, and Volkmar to cover 1909. So if you want to go.
Hold on, I'm going to transfer to Martin, so you guys all get to see how this works.
Martin,
Okay.
can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right.
From quite distance.
Okay, you are now.
Okay, I show my screen.
Yeah, let's see if that works.
Just to switch to the presentation mode. And then I have to get rid of this control screen here. Okay, what I would like to present here is about the existing improvements for revenue accounting and reporting version 1.3. Just to provide a little context here. Okay, first I have to explain that I always present under the disclaimer, because sometimes we are also talking about functionality which may come up in future. So just to provide you some background or the normal information, the context about revenue accounting and reporting release 1.3. This is the add-on, as you may know, and this is used from all customers with ERP, but also from customers with S/4HANA up to 1709. Just to distinguish here, from 1809 on, we have revenue accounting and reporting embedded in SAP Finance. This is the part where Volkmar comes into the game. Here, I'm talking from the perspective of AIS, that's the Application Innovation Services, which is dealing with maintenance. Volkmar is really dealing with the development itself, so all the nice and pretty features in future. And
so Martin, let me just pause you for a second, just so everyone in the room understands. So what Martin's trying to explain is there's actually now two teams managing RAR, right? So we've got Martin that helps found the product. He's actually moved on to the AIS team, and they're continuing to provide support and bug fixes and some enhancements on the RAR 1.3 code line. Volkmar and Gerold and their team, actually some of the other folks that worked on RAR originally, are now also working on 1909. And so they just so you don't get confused. So we've got, the good news is we've got lots of people working on RAR. Just realize there's two teams focused, and we'll get a little bit more into the roadmap on that. Okay, Martin, back to you.
Yeah, just to mention, we are still one team somehow. At least we have one one board member here in the same area. So, but we are acting as one team. But just to have to distinguish between maintenance and development, so that development can really focus on developing new stuff here. And we are responsible now for release 1.3, which is available for the enhancement package up to 8 from SAP ERP 6.0, and as I've said, also from some versions of S/4HANA on-premise. Actually, as I said, from 1809 on, which we will take over also quite soon, I guess, this whole functionality is embedded in SAP Finance, so it's not longer an add-on anymore. However, the main function or the functionality remains the same. But I have to say, from this release, from 1809 on, we will have also via a refactored solution, which is, we have additional code there, which is not available in release 1.3, where we will focus on innovation there. So I've listed here a note where you can see a little bit of details about the release strategy for 1.3. I have to say here, it's very important this is always our recommendation, that we ask our customers to run and implement always the latest support package. I know in reality this is sometimes very cumbersome. We try to support that as much as possible. Yeah, but I understand if some customers are on an older release or not release on an older support package, but it is always helpful to have the latest support packages in place. Just to say again, we are in release 1.3 not in the position to provide disruptive changes, and thus not really the big innovations you may expect in future. But what we are doing is some sort of continuous improvement there where we can help, and where the effort is overseeable and manageable, and where we can, for example, provide quick wins. That is something we also are looking for, even if it's, you call it a new functionality. We must be very careful here because we have a release, and normally new features and functions are part of a new release and not a part of a support packages. But we have means to deal with that legally and internally, to provide minor enhancements, which I hope they are also quite effective. But we need to get in touch with you as well to identify these kind of quick wins. But again, to repeat, the main innovation will be in revenue accounting and reporting within S/4HANA 1809, and now with the new version 1909, later on further releases. And there we focus on innovation. Just to say some milestones from revenue accounting and reporting. Here we have since support package 8. By the way, you understand the difference between support package and feature packets. We had feature packets 4, 5, 6, and 7. Here we were able to provide substantial new functionality. Thinking of the revenue recognition, SAP SD revenue recognition parity means we will be delivered at that time missing functionality which you may have with SD revenue recognition in place. But with support packages, we are dealing with bug fixes and so on, and with minor enhancements. But from SP08, we are general available. However, we actually have implemented the same activation process as in S/4HANA. We don't reject customers just because it's general available. So we don't reject customers, but we want to know of new customers just to understand if they are running into foreseeable issues. And then we are trying to get in contact with them and to tell them, please be careful. We see they're an issue or they are an issue, just to safeguard the implementation a little bit. Of course, we cannot do that in a comprehensive way as consulting can do that, but at least we can guide them to some more information to check their plans. Let's say it like this. About the schedule, this is a better slide for schedule. We had now a very regular schedule, almost quarterly for each feature pack and the support package. By the way, the next support package will be out there soon. But I understand sometimes there are also differences in or issues in understanding what a support package is. A support package is just a gathering of different nodes so that customer can implement it in one, so that they don't have to implement node by node. And thus, I can tell you all the nodes available in SP10 are already out there. So you can implement it if you like. But the SP10, support package 10, will be available on 9/11 this year. We plan to have another support package in the same frequency. That's support package 11. That will be then available in mid of December, I think, for you. From that time on, we will extend the frequency, or we will have a less frequent delivery, because we think already now, if experienced that the robustness and stability is much better than in the past. So indicated to less nodes we have to provide for bug fixing, indicated with less incidents. Of course, we still have to deliver support packages, and I cannot exclude that there are still bugs in our solution, of course. But it shows some sort of an increased robustness. And I think we have to go this path because less frequent deliveries will be better to be applied for customers. If you have to apply always new support packages, it's a tremendous, probably tremendous test effort for you. So we want to extend or have less frequent deliveries here. However, we will deliver node by node. Here I've listed, that's also, I think you will get this in this presentation, I've listed also the places where you can find all information about the different support package, which kind of nodes are embedded there. Actually, I would like to point you to some exemplary continuous improvements in the various support packages, for example, for SP9. There are more in there, but just to give you some hints that it's not always bug fixing what we are providing there. For example, with a node where we allow a better flexibility in the account determination for invoice correction postings. Here we were quite strict in the past that the source of the account specified in the corresponding deferral item, it was used as a target account. And that restricts us, it restricts you a lot. And some customers want to define their own accounts with a better level of freedom. And you can do that now with this node. On the other hand, we have two nodes for period end closing. For the practicability of period end closing, it is always the case that there can be erroneous contracts, and it takes some time to fix the erroneous contracts. Therefore, we've provided in the past the ability to move these contracts to the next period. It is a quite tricky functionality because you have to align with your auditors, because if a contract belongs to this period, and you move it to the next period, it's always a subject of discussion with the auditor, I guess. However, it is heavily used because you have to do the period end closing. And now we've extended this a little bit. So in the past, you were only able to move and shift the contracts after the complete posting run. Now you can do this also after program A, the transfer of revenue. That means the calculation of revenue and the calculation of program B and the calculation of contract liabilities and assets. Yes. So you have a better flexibility. The next note is about that you can have now a report in place to do this for more contracts than just one. At the moment, you just can do that contract by contract, which is quite cumbersome if you have more contracts to deal with. Now you can deal with that with more contracts. But again, I have to say this is very tricky, and you have to be careful in applying this process. Then we have another maybe important, that was at least important for our telcos, the archiving. We've extended our archiving in a way that you can now implement custom-specific archivability checks using your own fields here to check whether a contract and so on can be archived. There are also some topics in SP10, which is planned, but the nodes here are already available. So we have changed a little bit the data source, one of the major data source we have with a new extraction method, and that improves a lot of performance. We've experienced here sometimes runtime error because of processing large data volumes. That is cured with this node. So it's some sort of performance improvements. Then we have enhancement in data privacy protection. This is a legal requirement, especially here in Europe, where we've implemented the end of purpose check. So if there is no purpose anymore for a business partner, this business partner must be not shown to normal users. And so we've implemented this check, and there are 2 nodes there where you do the end of purpose check, and of course a normal user should not see this business partner anymore. For auditing processes, that means that it should be still available. But yeah, these are enhancements we've provided here. Then we have a very interesting new functionality, which we provide a consulting node that you can now use the BF Plus trace viewer. So you can now trace the BF Plus. You can implement a trace here, and to understand why BF Plus had provided this kind of results. We think that is very helpful. It is also helpful maybe for us once we have to analyze your data. Then we have something for the techies or for the customers which have heavily used our heavily enhanced our solution. We also now allow manual performance obligations to be created, changed through contract creation change via our API. Of course, you can change that. You can add manual performance applications via the UI. Now you can use also an API. Before, it was only possible during transition. Now you have 2 ways of how to add new performance applications in an automated way, not only manual way as in the past. You know the concept of a linked and leading POB, but now you can also implement your own logic here via API to add manual POBs. And then last but not least, we enhance the RAR monitor in a way that we have enhanced the selection criteria. Now you can also select processed and partially processed RARs together, so that it's a better to use functionality for the RAR monitor. That's all what I wanted to tell you about this SP 9 and 10, but please have a look at the notes we provide here. Now, I would like to come to another topic, just to tell you or to provide you the idea of a new functionality we have also in mind for release 1.3. Come on, I have to get rid of this.
And this is really would be something that is really more of a concept, and just wanted to see. I think, Martin, you want to see if people are interested in this concept or interested
exactly
in providing feedback on this.
I think that is something we are doing. We are just exploring it now, and we are trying to assemble some sort of a prototype. It is a migration cockpit. Before, I really thought migration is always a topic for, let's say, for a single task. You migrate data and that's it, and you will never think about migration again. But we saw, for at least for big customers, it's rather a regular activity with all these mergers and acquisitions. So the big groups are always, well, let's say, buying companies or whatever. At least that's what we've experienced from our company itself. So this is rather a regular task, this migrating of data, and this is always cumbersome. Here we have to deal with a lot of let's say programs and processes, and we have to deal with tests and so on. And if you do that step by step, and the programs are here and there, then you have no structure in that. We want to structure this process. Currently, it's really some customers think what really needs to be done to migrate the data. In which sequence I have to do that. Once I know it once, but half a year later I have to repeat that again. And then during migration, I don't know what's the real status, where am I, and what are the results of the previous steps. So we thought about some sort of a migration cockpit. Don't know if we'll call it later on migration cockpit or whatever. However, so we think that the migration process cockpit will provide an E2E overview and monitor of the migration process end to end, while having all programs and steps in one place in this particular cockpit. In this particular cockpit, you can monitor, you can check all the outputs of the various steps and identify or analyze if that is okay or not, and you can go back if necessary. You can then start the cleanup via this process and to migrate it again. That to have that in place, I think it will be a long journey because it's also quite sensitive and tricky to provide here a standard solution. But we want to look into that. So thinking of the scope of a first migration cockpit, it will be rather a prototype. So we will focus on the foreground processes, which will have some limits for the production use, but we will definitely and extend this and also go for the background processes. At the beginning, it will be rather for testing purposes. But of course, we understand if that will be used in a productive manner, then we have to go also for the background processes to process large data, which provides some more complexity. And then first, we limit ourselves to the SD data, as we think we will want to focus all the customers who have to go, who have to in the end migrate to revenue accounting, while their SD revenue recognition functionality is going to be not to be there in S/4HANA, for example. And then in the first version, we won't support non-SAP data where you may have tables in place. And just thinking of a version of SAP IT, they have a version in place here, which we refer to, where you can also correct the data of the legacy, where you can also directly correct the legacy data out of the cockpit. That is not part of the first solution, but we think of it later on. And we may restrict the scope in the first version of a non-distributed landscape. But based on your feedback, we can also reprioritize the functionality here. But we want to prioritize the functionality because I think it's in favor of a faster delivery. And of course, we want to have customer feedback. We don't want to develop this solution in a lab, an isolated lab, because all what we think, we cannot think about the real world, which hopefully we can get from your feedback out there. So our ask for collaboration here, if you are interested in such a functionality, maybe you think, okay, migration is done for us, we don't need that, that's fine. But if a customer is out there and think, okay, that could be helpful for us also in future, so we ask for feedback. We could even think to provide a test prototype for you and that you can play around with that. But I have to say an NDA must be in place. We want to follow our process of a customer engagement initiative, although we may not follow each step, and we want to avoid any kind of bureaucracy here. So if you are interested, just send a mail to me, and we then think of a follow-up call of how we can collaborate. Maybe one customer, maybe more customers, and then we think about how to deal that in a group of customers. So I think I have exceeded my time. I don't know. So with that, I would like to hand over to Volkmar.
All right, let's see how we can.
Thanks, Martin.
Can I, how can I?
I'll take care of that.
Okay, thank you.
Volkmar, you should be able to present. There we go.
Okay, so let's switch over. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
So hopefully this box here, should I move this away or? Okay, good. Yeah, as per introduction, my name is Volkmar Zahn. I'm here together with my colleague Gerold Wellenhofer. We're both part of the product engineering and product management organization. So basically part of the development group. And what we would like to focus on in the next few minutes is around revenue accounting as it moves to 1809, the core, the S/4HANA core, as well as also give a little brief view of what is happening with 1909. So there have been many questions, obviously, what happened to the add-on as we know it, what have been the changes, and from that perspective, it's just natural to speak a little bit about this. As we've change that now. As with Martin's presentation, obviously we are providing here some forward-looking statements, and I need to link that to the usual disclaimer. Now, before we go into the details of S/4HANA and what it means, I just want to share with you a little bit what the momentum is. What we've seen over the last couple of years is that with revenue accounting, we have been trying to cover a lot of different use cases, industries, and scenarios. And when we did the move into S/4HANA, both on-premise as well as cloud, it's a natural point to look back and what and how we can improve the solution. So obviously, one of the main drivers is still the adoption of US GAAP and IFRS 15. But what we see also is that customers are looking for much better integrated scenarios. And some of these scenarios are pretty simple. So for some customers, it's just the timing of the revenue recognition, where actually the event is the main driver. Other customers are certainly looking into some of the complexities and where really a revenue contract is required. Also, in terms of the volumes, we have seen quite some diversity. There are customers with over 100 million contracts in the landscape. There are other customers with just a couple of hundred contracts. So again, we need to look into how we can improve for both of these scenarios. And then on top, we have also seen customers that are looking for point solutions just for RefRec, not integrate necessarily into, tightly integrated into the financials landscape. So something which can be implemented in a quick way, just on top of existing non-SAP environments. As a result, we have come up with a number of integration themes, especially now in the S/4HANA Cloud Edition. So we have dedicated flavors of the revenue recognition for project-based services. For service management is a new option since 1902, and also the classical what is called BRIM scenario in on-premise, here referred to as invoice to cash, and of course then following the roadmap along these items. In terms of the options we provide to the market, certainly a main driver will remain, and given the customers we see adopting the solution will be the on-premise stack, and where also revenue accounting and reporting will remain the main solution possible, of course, as a true on-premise installation, but also as a private cloud as part of HANA Enterprise Cloud or the single tenant edition. On the other hand, we see a growing momentum in the cloud environment. There with very integrated scenarios as part of S/4HANA Cloud itself, but also where customers look at the point solution. And this is where we currently position the SAP revenue recognition option, which was formerly called Calidus RevSim. For some of you, this may be well known. I don't want to go into the details and when to look into what solution, because for today's meeting, the main focus should be really on what we have been providing as part of the S/4HANA 1809 and 1909, the on-premise stack. Some of these timelines have already been provided through Martin. So the add-on itself, functionality was provided for feature packs and then regular support packages. What we had started back in already Q3 2018 was to move the former add-on functionality technically into 1809, and then also delivered some enhancements already in feature pack 1, which have not been released publicly. So it was more some first developments around contract management, which will now become a new part of the S/4HANA 1909 stack as it is released, or it's planned to release, I have to say, towards the end of Q3. So first of all, what does that mean for 1809? That is a very common question. So what happens when we move to 1809? What happens to my existing add-on? And first of all, I can state that what you have known as the former revenue accounting add-on is now an integral part of SAP S/4HANA, which was, first of all, a very technical move. It's not coming immediately with a lot of changes. We have not been adopting everything to more HANA code base or translating everything into CDS views. It was, first of all, a very, very technical move. And as a result, we also try to align the development flows between the add-on, you can see here feature pack 6, and the corresponding S/4HANA releases. So feature pack 6 was aligned with 1809 itself. And for feature pack 7, we also ensured that this is mostly aligned with the 1809 feature pack 1 stack. So for instance, if you have been on an older release in ECC or in S/4HANA 1709 or whatever, you can look at this relationship. So for feature pack 7, you should have a similar shape as with the feature pack 1 1809. Obviously now feature pack 2 is already out for 1809. We continued with the special release restriction. So Martin mentioned this already before. This is not to create burdens on your side, but rather to keep track of who is implementing the solution. That used to be easier with the add-on because we had the usual ramp-up process where customers had to sign up. Now being part of the core S/4HANA 1909, obviously we are part of the major stack and cannot go for a dedicated add-on process. So we had to build in some logic which ensured that we can get in touch with the customers, know how the solution is implemented, and also advise on certain constraints. So what does that mean if you are already an existing customer and you move on to 1809, 1909 later on? You will not see actually any impact, but if you have, for instance, a new installation or you are a new customer that has not used revenue cutting before, then you will get some information in the system when you try to access the customizing, which points then to the release process. And usually that means that you have to issue a ticket, an incident, and then we take care of that. Now, how did we move on with 1909? As I said before, in 1809, we mainly focused on a technical move. It did not come with all the options and benefits S/4HANA brings. And for those of you that have been working with revenue accounting or already some time, you know that some of the options we used obviously have been very much dependent on the NetWeaver stack. So we used, for instance, WebDynPro. We did not use any Fiori because in the end we were dependent on the corresponding NetWeaver stack. Or in terms of reporting, obviously we did not use CDS views. That was more BW extractors. So with the add-on, we have been very much tied to the environment we had available. And as a result, now being able to move into the HANA stack, that enabled us, provided us with a lot of new features. And we took that chance to also look into some of the constraints we had seen before. And some of these constraints were around performance. As I said before, one of the issues we have seen is that we had to serve quite some diversity of customer groups. Customers with a huge volume of contracts, customers with contracts which in itself had many thousands of performance obligations. So obviously, when we came to market with revenue accounting and the add-on, that was not the prime use case we wanted to look at. So when we moved into S/4HANA, and specifically now with 1909, we tried to specifically look at those scenarios and came to the conclusion that to serve these use cases, we have to actually provide an optimized version of the revenue accounting contract management. Now, the big question is, how can you deal with that? At one hand, you have quite a lot of customers, with also some significant investment on the customer side. On the other hand, you have the need for some major changes. And the way we handle that is that we introduced this optimized version in parallel to the existing contract management. And the existing contract management we refer to now as contract management classic. You see some similarities maybe to other areas in finance, so GL, so we had a General Ledger Classic as well as the new GL. So here in this case we take some similar steps. This optimized version, which is also what we want to share with you today in some more details, so Gerold will talk about this, has been specifically designed around performance optimizations. So here we look specifically at contracts with a bigger number of performance obligations. So you may know that there's some restriction constraint notes out advise on the number of POEs you assign to a contract. But we also focused on some additional features, and the most prominent one again comes probably more from the telco industry, also industries that have a high degree of automation. Day-based contract management. Again, we talk about this.
Hey, Volkmar?
Yes, please.
There's somebody in the background. There seems to be noise or something, or maybe somebody who's a presenter is also talking at the same time.
Okay, should not come from my room because.
Hang on 1 second. I'll fix it.
Or someone needs to go on mute.
Sorry, Martin. We're going to mute you for a little bit. Maybe you or somebody, but let's see if that's better.
Okay, so I just go on talking. So the optimized contract management focuses specifically around performance optimizations. And if you're interested, obviously we can share some details around this. So in our labs environment, we did tests with some major contracts, contract changes, especially around time-based POBs, and see how these work out in terms of memory consumption as well as CPU consumption. And additional features, and for that we talk in a little bit later. Now, again, coming back to the point that from a customer's perspective, obviously there's always a concern. What does that mean? Will it completely change? Will there be one flat table in revenue accounting? Do I have to change everything? So one of the design constraints for this optimized contract management was that we said we wanted to keep the existing database tables and mostly also processes as much as stable as possible, to certainly not endanger running process or and also to reduce the risk of an upgrade. So from that perspective, of course, there are changes, especially in the coding for this optimized contract management. But what customers can do is they can use the optimized contract management in parallel to the existing classic contract management. And this is done by the introduction of a new customizing table. So basically, you can say my existing contracts based on a contract category will remain with the existing processes in contract management. But I want to maybe have some of those contracts for a certain area customized under a new contract category, and there I can use the optimization features. With this new version of contract management, we are not yet able to cover all the scenarios we used to do in classic contract management. So we assume that customers will continue to use the classic contract management for some while. Obviously, we are subsequently enhancing or plan to enhance this new contract management. We'll also introduce some other improvements we see in the market. So how can we streamline, for instance, the integration between the sender components? How can we optimize also the process into GL? But now for 1909, the main focus was really on the contract management itself. And as a result, we believe that with this optimized version, we can specifically serve those customers that have highly automated RefRec processes. What that means is also that as a result, change processes are first of all only supported coming from the operational system. UI-based changes, as we've seen it also with some customers, would be rather something for the future roadmap. To handle the performance requirements, which has been a significant driver of this redesign or refactoring, we of course had to rework the code and also simplify the code. And to some extent, that also has an impact if you have custom code. So for instance, certain bodies would need to be switched. I don't want to go into the details. Once 1909 becomes available, all of these details will be listed in the release information note. If you are interested, of course, in more details, for which this session here, the user group session is probably too short, then we would be also happy to have some follow-on discussions if required. With that, I would like to hand over to Gerold, and Gerold will talk you through some of these upcoming features with 1909.
Yeah, thank you, Volkmar. So we can stay with that presentation and we go to the next slide. I have the pleasure to show you some of those enhanced features within the optimized contract management. As Volkmar said, many of those new features were inspired from the high volume business, telco or service industry. And the first example is a day-based contract modification. So in the service industry, we have the scenario that in the middle of a month, there is a termination or a contract modification, and the service provided so far up to a specific effective date shall belong to the existing rules and shall be recognized as such. But from that date on, then the new rules shall be in place. And so this is then realized with this day-based contract modification, where you can specify an effective date, and then the system calculates the revenue recognized up to so far, up to the effective date, and then triggers reallocation. On the right-hand side, you see Fiori UI. It's a Outlook which sort of is done in the cloud release 1911 and is planned to then later be downported as well to the on-premise as well. But Fiori is an important use case for us and activity, and we see also later some more examples of those activities. If you go to the next slide, we come to the termination with a termination expense. A use case for that is that if a contract is terminated as the payer does not pay any longer, then we are in a situation that there is a contract asset or also a receivable adjustment which is not balancing to zero. And also, in addition, there might be a revenue scheduled already for that specific month. So the termination with termination expense, this clears then the contract asset as well as the receivable adjustment, taking also into account any revenue which shall be sort of not recognized. In the example on the right-hand side, you see then a total termination expense of 807 currency units, and that is coming from the contract asset as well as from the postings from the receivable adjustment also after then taking the revenues into account. Those postings for the termination expense are then done within a separate posting category. In the next slide, we see then a further feature that is the freeze of a period for revenue recognition. So if a service shall not be provided for a specific period, then the example is that the revenue is frozen during that period and the contract is extended by that frozen period. In that example, we see on the right-hand side a freeze period for 10 days from the 1st of March to the 10th of March, and that period is then extended at the end of the contract. You can create now a freeze period, you can change or unfreeze dates of that existing freeze periods, and you also can delete existing periods. Now we go to the next slide, and here we sort of now come into the area where we optimize now the UI for the cloud, but also for on-premise. And so now we can fully support the new processes of the optimized contract management with Fiori UI. And you see in this orange box 4 areas where we support, where we also see later on some examples. So we will see a quick combine of revenue contracts. We also see the contract management. That means display of contract view, B status as well as revenue schedule. We see here on the right-hand side overview page for the revenue accountant. So the recognized revenue overview, the top 5 business partners, the 5 best sellers, and the revenue trend. And we also go in the analytics area. We also look into the power of HANA with the CDS view. So the last example, which you see on the next slide, is realized with the Design Studio. So we now can show the disaggregation of revenue with the powerful CDS view of S/4HANA and with the flexibility which is coming with the Design Studio. Now some further examples with the Fiori. This is the contract management, which includes revenue schedule or also manual fulfillment. On the right-hand side, you see here the open and realized revenue of time-based performance obligation as well as the contract status. As a last example of our Fiori applications, I show you here the combine or the quick combine of revenue accounting contracts. So you can mark contracts which shall be combined, and upfront you could have also a selection of those contracts which shall go in this user interface. That should give you a glimpse of our activities, and that is some features, but also UIs, and especially what you cannot see, the performance which is coming now with the optimized contract management. Now I give back to the organizer.
Thank you.
All right, we're just about on time. Thank you, Gerold, and thank you, Volkmar, and thanks, Martin, as well. I think we're ready for our first customer presentation. Yep. About on time.
Retake control.
All right, ready for Steve Schaak from TDS, right?
Should I go to the podium, or can I be heard from here?
You might want to try
speaker's right
standing
here.
up over there.
The speaker bars are there and here, right? So if you want, you can run the slides and you can just stand right there. I can stand here.
Just hold on one second.
Why don't you do a test? Sibilance testing. 1, 2, 3.
How would we know if anybody out there can hear us? We're in here.
Good question.
You can ask Volkmar if he can hear you.
Volkmar, Martin, or Gerold.
Volkmar, can you hear us? They can.
You know, one second.
The others
Don't
should
put
be
in your slide, though.
Well, I wasn't, but maybe you are.
Yeah, maybe we're not.
Just microphone, please.
Oh, this one's on.
Right. I can see through the microphone. You can see through the microphone. Well, you can't see it, but through the microphone.
You gotta do that window.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Now we can, Martin. Can you hear us?
Can you hear us?
I can hear you, yeah.
Great.
All right, thanks.
All right,
Yeah,
so
we're working on projecting in the room. Can you guys see it online?
So we've got some slides up in the room. TDS's RAR journey. I assume those are visible to the internet.
Yeah. Now, one quick story. So, Steve, I think we met. Did you come up to Newtown Square
We did a long time ago. Yeah. So that was an interesting meeting because there were people. I thought we were in a bad state, but there were some people. I think they were from like Lockheed or Boeing or something like that.
January, Lockheed.
Yeah.
I thought to myself,
2016.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like 3 years.
2015.
2015. Okay. Yeah.
Boeing's one of those companies that has the unique position of being the only ones who haven't had to do revenue accounting because they got a 5 to 6 year grace period. Must be great to work with the government.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess as a part of our to set some context, my name is Steve Schaak. I work for TDS. TDS used to be known as Telephone and Data Systems. So to further set context, we began to diversify several years, maybe a decade ago, really, into other areas like hosted managed services companies, cable TV companies. So we rebranded ourselves from Telephone and Data Systems to just TDS, right? And TDS as a corporate entity is basically a holding company. And we own, the 2 biggest units that we own are US Cellular, which actually trades separately on the market, but is majority owned by TDS Inc., and TDS Telecom, which is in and of itself an amalgamation of many smaller rural-ish telephone companies around the country. So back in the day, before Ma Bell, if you were just a guy in Provo, Utah or whatever, you might build a telephone company just for Provo. And then eventually TDS came in and bought you out, and now we have 100 and some of those little things, right? So those are the two major business units, and I'll get into the architecture of how we do revenue recognition for each of them, because it's very different.
You guys also own OneNac.
Yes, we do. So OneNac is the hosted managed services companies. We bought, I think, 5 of them over the span of like 2 years, and brought them together under one name, OneNac. And then actually we've kind of shifted around the ownership of OneNac, and now actually it resides as a corporate entity, but that's neither here nor there for today's conversation. So in my role at TDS is I'm an enterprise process architect. So my group is the process reengineering and consulting group. So we're like an internal consultancy, and we've shifted over time from IT to finance. So currently, our group is in the controllers department, so we're technically a finance team. One of my colleagues, Clint Watts, who's not really my colleague, he's really my IT service owner. He runs the financials team in the SAP/application development and support organization in our corporate IT department. So really his team, and when you see these slides, we go through it, his team has a sub-team that is devoted just to running RAR because of the amount of heat our data generates. That's not sure we're going to be able to successfully toggle to Clint for slide 3 or not, but
yes, just try and do that as soon as we get there.
Yeah, just be aware that there's another aspect to TDS in our presentation today. So I think we can go to the first slide. So here's a kind of a high-level application architecture for our contract by contract scenario. So this is at US Cellular, and so because of the very specific contract business that cell phone users get into when they sign up for cell service, it became pretty apparent to us that we needed to track each individual contract to effectively, create the revenue adjustments. We didn't want to because of the data involved, but when it came down to like a conversation with auditors and maintaining GAAP compliance, we were presented with a catch-22, right? If you can't prove that the difference between contract by contract and a portfolio method is not material, then you have to do the contract by contract method. And since we didn't have any data to prove that, we had to build the contract by contract method. So maybe someday later, we could prove that the portfolio method was not materially different. So thank you, auditors. To set a little bit of context, back in the days before RAR, so you'll see on the very upper left-hand corner, TOPS, which is the code name for our billing system at US Cellular, which is an ABDOC system. It's not in our environment at all. It's like different servers, different world. But every day for years, they were summarizing all of the transactions from the billing system into like targeted GL accounts, right? They would just send us a file at night. That's over the top of this whole thing. So the over the top as is daily summary, and that still persists, right? It works. We don't want to mess with it. We post all of the entries into the right general ledger account every night on this really simple path. RAR comes along, and now all of the revenues that we're posting, they need to be judged to see whether or not they need to be adjusted. So we went around the block many times on how we should do this, and where we landed is what technically happens is that TOPS replicates on like a 5-minute basis to this ODS so that people can run reports or whatever, not affecting the transactional database. But okay, so we've got all of our transactions in this ODS. What they do is every day they dump out all of the details, right? So up to 30 million records per day, although that's a very high watermark. Usually it's more like 9 to 12 or whatever. But still, a bunch of records come out on these files, and we like immediately post them into, well, I shouldn't say immediately. First, we do several checks to manage the completeness. So from a internal auditing perspective, people were very concerned about both the completeness and the accuracy of our postings. Right? So the first thing we need to do is make sure that the detailed file actually has the same data set as the summary file. So we sum up all the details and make sure that the numbers match the summarized file amounts. Otherwise, stop right there. But I don't know that. I think there was a couple of times very, very early in the we had a pilot phase before we went live. We found some discrepancies and we figured out the problem was. I don't know that we've had any problems with that since. So anyways, we post these details in these Z tables. Well, first we get the files in flat file format in a Unix server, but then we put them into these custom tables, Z tables that have all of the records, right? And then we run these custom ABAP programs, Z programs, to like filter out all of the extraneous stuff because we don't care about payments, right? I mean, it's not relevant to revenue recognition, the performance obligations and the contracts all set up. Whether they pay us or not, it's not really relevant. So many, many, many line items on these files have no bearing whatsoever. So let's say 1 to 5% of these tens of millions of records actually mean anything. Those are the records that then get put into, well, first we put them into sales orders, right? So I guess there's a little bit of distinction I should probably call out here. So all of these records that we get that are now deemed relevant because of their transaction code that's showing us that it's a new plan or it's a DAF access fee, which, as a side note, it was super important, had a different process to it back in like 2016 or 17, and we portfolioed the DAFs. We didn't put them in with the contracts. I'm pretty sure that the market has changed because our spokesman on TV says no more activation fees. So the market seems to obsolete or change this structure, which I think Quint or I will get into later. But so we have all these different. We break the files into these different tables, and then we take the data from those tables and we create sales orders out of them. There was a time for about 2 weeks when the guys from Bramasol first arrived, Schaefer and all, very good consultants. We tried at first, we thought it would be simpler if we just did a direct interface right into RAR, right? And we started to like map out the mappings to get these things without going through SD. At some point, the complexity started to raise its head, and we're like, let's forget that. We already use SD for other things. Let's just create a new order type and run with it. It was probably a very good decision to do that because one of the things that we learned pretty quickly was we get orders from the biller, but we don't have enough detail to make the contract yet because we don't have the prices, right? So all we can do is create a sales order header, and we need to wait until they actually pay for us to like fill in the rest of the thing, and then we have to like set the contract up, and then it's actually kind of a month too late. So we set the contract up, but it's post-dated the last month. So in the month we actually get the order, there's this whole other process which bundles up all of the orders that we got that month that we can't make contracts out of and makes an accrual for those, right? And then we reverse the accrual when we get the details the next month. So that is one of the blessings of the sales order process. We could actually hold all of these pending contracts in a state where they're easily bill outable later when we had more detail, right? So header, then when records came the next month, POB, POB, POB. So the sales order line items are essentially the POBs of our contracts, right? So then we just take all of those orders and run them through RAR. And actually at that point, right, so once we've done all of this work, the last step of like taking the sales orders and running them through RevRec, or what we call RevRec, the RAR module or add-in, that runs fairly smoothly, right? We don't have there's not a ton left for us to do at that point. It's the management of all of this data coming from our billing system that's really the challenge. And then once we get an RAR, right, then the sub-ledger and the general ledger, we post all that stuff through to our current BI application, and runs through, actually, we used to use disclosure management, but we got off of that, so this slide's pretty old. But you can see we run that right out to our financial statements in the end, right out of our SAP environment. So that's the contract by contract view of the world, and the US Cellular view of the world. Go to the next slide.
So I'm gonna try and get Clint.
No, not yet. So the other major business unit, telecom, the small telephone companies, we do portfolios for them, which more or less we use the same like inside SAP architecture, where we have custom tables, the same custom tables, but different name, different ones for telecom. But the idea is still the same. So, and we create sales orders, but in this case, instead of like getting all of the details from the biller and creating individual contracts, it turns out the standard price and the contract price aren't different. So like where it nets to zero, we don't need to make any kind of adjustment for revenue. However, there's all these promos that they offer, right? And I think from a, maybe not strictly telecom, but an example that we used to mind is we were trying to break into the cable TV market over our fiber optic networks and compete with the cable company that was in, let's say, Sun Prairie, Wisconsin, which is a real thing. I don't know that this promo was offered in Sun Prairie, but one of the promos I think that they offered back in the day was if you sign up for, let's say, 3 years of TDS TV, we will actually give you a TV, right? Well, that's a benefit to signing up. So then every promo like that, every month we get the number of people that signed up for it, and we create a sales order for that month for that promo. So for telecom, you can imagine, let's say there's a couple dozen running promos at any time. So we create a couple of dozen orders, each with the performance obligation that sums up all of the benefits for the number of people for that month. And then we create a contract for that month for 2 to 3 years or whatever. And then it just kind of runs and fades into, non-existence eventually. And every month we do the same thing. So for every promo, there's a contract or there's a sales order and a contract every month. And another layer of complexity to this is when I said we had hundreds of telephone companies, they all have their own company code number in SAP, which is regulatory, right? It's not ideal from an SAP standpoint, but we have to do it. We have to report separately each one of those books to the government. So even though there's only let's say 24 sales orders being created because there's only 24 promos running, that's month over month over month, so that happens all the time. And then there's the hundreds of them but still, if you think about it, so we're creating, let's say, 150 sales orders per month for telecom. That's nowhere near what we're doing for US Cellular. So backing up, how do we actually get there? Actually, the business provides us these spreadsheets on a monthly basis, and we just have a very simple upload utility. We just upload their spreadsheets every month, and then we just put it into this engine, which runs exactly the same way for telecom as it does for US Cellular, except at a much smaller volume, right? So this is there was a point in time when we're like, let's not even worry about this because we could literally type them in if we had to. But once we got everything else up and running, it was pretty easy just to feed these through the mechanism that was working the high volumes. So, yeah, or questions, I guess.
Can we open up Clint?
Yeah, see if Clint's there.
Yes.
Will you be addressing the fulfillment side of things?
We kind of don't, right? Once the contract is set up, we have terms, right? So if people terminate, we cut them off, and that one functionality that's coming in 1909 looks like it might be fairly interesting. And here's another side note about when we started, there was a lot of people that were signing up for 2-year contracts, but EIP, like the idea of you sign up, you buy your phone on an installment plan. We thought and got approval that that's kind of a loophole, that if you're on that plan and not like a 2-year contract, really your contract is only worth 1 month because you've agreed to take a month of service from us and this phone from us, and you have an installment plan for your phone. But technically, once you've made a payment, you're kind of free and clear of the contract. You can walk away. We're just going to bill you for the balance of the phone. right? So the whole idea, like, and the market's really shifting that way. I don't know how many more people still sign up for these 2-year contracts as opposed to EIP or even like bring your own device. When you're not even like, you're only, we're not like the performance obligation or the contract price difference isn't hardly calculable. So all of this, like millions of lines of data are now more or less being compressed into these like 1-month contracts. They just expire off. Like, so we have this giant, like, it's a big number, but it goes away like every month. Every month we do the same thing. It goes away every month. So it's a little weird. Then, you know, you technically the accruals and stuff. So really it's like a 2 or a 3-month lifespan in the system for most of these things. One other thing I'd like to point out, not that it's super relevant for RevRec, but this whole arena of EIP, and I don't know that this is, I think the cat's kind of out of the bag, and I've heard other people are doing this too, but we took those, we securitized the contracts for the EIPs and able to like borrow against them, right? So having all the data, it turns out there was an ancillary blessing, right? We're able to like take that and build portfolios of securitized receivables and give them to another bank, and they're like, oh yes, we will give you a better credit line on those because we know that you're owed that money by the people. So on some level, right, we want to get away from processing all that data, but on the other hand, processing all that data has this other actual financial benefit to it. So maybe we'll never get away from it. And maybe also when we go to S4, we'll kill the summarized ones, like just give us the data and we'll just post them into the general ledger. So there's a couple of different things that could happen in the future because of, people like to say that there's no, there was never any benefit to RevRec. It was just a edict from the government that you had to do this. But I think, and this is generally true about most things, once you dig into the details, you start learning some things, and things that you didn't even think about before become possible, and then you start doing those, and then, well, it turns out maybe there was some benefit, but it never got it,
I mean, it's a good point. I mean, we'll, at another session, we'll talk about compliance. A lot of customers at first comply, then they optimize, which a lot of customers now are in the optimize phase, and then they transform from perhaps S4. But along the way, we've seen some customers in telco with Brim, and really they get, I mean, the new standard is so detailed, right? There's so much data, but they've been able to do some data mining back to the marketing side, and they understand pretty quickly which packages, consumers are picking up and which ones are dropping, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There is some of those benefits.
Absolutely. And also, I think I made this comment before the meeting started, Susan from SAP. It seems like these kind of things come up like regularly from the government. Let's recall Sarbanes-Oxley, right? And for like 3 or 4 years, that's all anybody did was socks. Does anyone, I mean, I'm sure people do it still, but they say they're doing it. I'm not really sure what happens.
They do it, but it's just part of what you do.
Right. It's been like automated and sublimated, and like there's not like teams devoted to like designing new SOX controls and testing them and all this. It's just a thing people do as a matter of course. And I think that that's where we're hoping that this kind of goes for us, is that as we get further along, it becomes routinized and it doesn't require the kind of care and feeding it currently does. And I think on the slide 3 and Clint, we'll get into what we are hoping to get to in the future.
Clint, are you there?
I am. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Some
Hello?
miracles of modern technology.
Awesome. Hey, guys, just one thing I'd like to add to that conversation you had as far as a positive to this compliance type of reporting. One thing that we've kind of come across too here as we go through and do our analysis, and we, as promotions come out and we make changes, we get into the nitty-gritty details of those changes, and we've come across actually situations where we were giving promotions to individuals who shouldn't receive those promotions, and we were able to stop those ahead of time before the company kind of lost money on those deals. So just maybe one additional added benefit of the standard. So, all right, so
hang on, Clint, somebody has a question.
We got a question here.
In case of early termination, the RAR handles the contract reversals and the recognizing everything, that's all done in RAR, or again it comes from the source which you showed in the slide number 2, and then it flows back to?
Yeah, it comes from the source. Like we get a termination file, let's call it, and apart from like all of the billing details, and then we find those people's sales orders and we cancel them, and then that flows through RAR as like any outstanding revenue gets written off.
So what is the volume that we are looking at here?
Good.
Oh, it is.
Yeah. So go ahead, Clint.
Pardon?
Go ahead.
Okay, awesome. So I'm Clint Watson, and I'm the manager of the team that supports the systems that process our RevRec transactions. So I think Steve kind of already covered off quite a bit on our major piece for the RevRec, which is the contract by contract for our wireless business, and kind of covered into how much high volume work we're doing there. The other piece that I'd like to add in on that, since we've gone live, is that in our instance, we've also created additional sources of information that we bring in to help put together those RevRec transactions and those sales orders. And that's primarily driven by, and this is unique to our business, is that, we right now are very cost conscious of what we can do with the billing system. And if we don't have to make changes to the billing system for certain adjustments, we won't, and we will go through other avenues. So we've realized that through that process, we've had to open up, I guess, our processing to accept information from other resources. So that's just in addition to what we do on a daily basis. And just also to level set with everybody, right now we're on version 1.3, support pack 3 of the RAR engine. We upgraded in November of 2017, but we haven't done anything since. And as I cover the challenges we face through implementation, that'll explain why we haven't done an upgrade at this point. So right now, some of the biggest challenges that we are running into are more focused around the pace of change within our business and then the flexibility of the system to handle those changes. So I've listed a couple examples here. So with the wireless industry, we're constantly changing the price plans and promotion. So this has a significant impact on our RevRec accounting requirements for the business. So our current system process to make a change on the system side is a traditional waterfall approach, but our business operations is more on an agile approach for changes. So this causes issues when we're trying to update the system requirements to handle the business changes that they're proposing. So from the system side, our standard changes is on a 3-month time period from the time we receive the accounting requirements to the time we can get the change implemented. And that allows us enough time to do design, develop, and test the change appropriately, because we do have a significant amount of customization within our process prior to the information going to RAR. But this time frame that we've been using doesn't really match well with the business, as they'd like to launch those plans and promotions much sooner. So we're basically right now in this kind of trying to figure out happy medium path to resolve this issue. So obviously the business wants it faster, and we would like to help them get there, but we also want to make sure we're getting things right, because when you're doing this volume of transactions for your system, if you don't test it right and things don't go the way that you want them to, you could end up with a significant error. So we're helping the business understand that too. Another challenge that we're facing is the introduction of new products in the business. So anytime we have new products introduced, we have to adjust our configuration to appropriately identify the new product and include it in our RevRec transactions. And the example we have here is our fixed wireless offering. So currently it includes a modem and in some cases an antenna to help get better service. So we need to identify both those items together for our RevRec purposes, using the data that business is able to provide us. And in most cases, this is where we've had to create another source file or manually modify an existing source file to accommodate the addition of new products and services. And this, again, creates additional complexity in the process, while potentially exposing us to errors or missed data. So we're trying to limit the amount of additional resources and manual intervention we have in our processes, but in some cases we just can't avoid it. And so then the third piece that we're running into, so over the past couple of years, we've accumulated a significant amount of data due to the processing of high volume number of transactions, and then also retaining the information for analysis, along with meeting our retention requirements. And as Steve mentioned, a significant amount of this is contract by contract method of accounting. And one requirement we have under that is we have to account for those contracts under the modifications too. So we'll have existing data in place, and then we'll receive new data for those contracts while they're currently being, if you want to say, amortized. And then we have to bring that information in and essentially include it in that contract and then continue on. So this creates a significant amount of system effort to identify those modifications and incorporate the necessary changes. And one thing we've noticed is our system jobs are now running longer, and they're competing with other non-RevRec jobs for system resources. So this has put a tremendous amount of strain on our system, especially during our month-end process when larger RevRec jobs are running to help produce the information to record to the GL. And to compound that issue, we only have 3 days and specific times within those days to run our jobs at month-end to complete. So the margin of error or failure is slim, and when we close the books, and this has created an environment where we have 24/7 monitoring and constant schedule changes for job processing. So not really your ideal environment for system performance. So some of the next steps that we're taking to help out with those challenges we're facing, currently my team is doing a system health check. So we have a project that's focused on improving the system performance and mitigating the risk of system failure when processing our RevRec transactions. So we're doing an end-to-end review of the process and identifying data that can be either archived or purged to help our system performance. Also, this project is identifying issues that we believe can be addressed by upgrading to the latest support pack of the RAR engine. So that kind of takes me into the next bullet where we plan to do an upgrade of the RAR engine in 2020. The reason we haven't thus far is, one, we haven't really had any issues with RAR engine. As Steve was saying, it actually works pretty smooth for us. So that's actually been a blessing. The other part is just because of the way our current process is set up, we haven't had a window long enough to just sit down and go through, do that analysis, determine all the impacts, do the testing, and do an upgrade. So now we're just like, hey, as we're doing the system health check, let's see if there's anything we can gain from doing the upgrade, and let's do the upgrade at this time, because that also is going to lead into the next bullet that I have is the simplification, as Steve was talking about. We'd like to simplify our current process. So, and this is more on the contract by contract basis that we have with our wireless company, is that we're exploring options to simplify that process from an accounting perspective, but also from a system perspective. So as Steve mentioned, we were talking about moving from contract by contract to the portfolio method. That's one idea that's been thrown out there to help bring it up a level. However, in the event that we can't do that change, just based on the accounting requirements and discussions with our auditors, we're going to explore other options that we can do to help streamline this process and simplify it. So it's, again, from the accounting side, it's more simplified, and from the system side, it's more simplified, because we do know what we're currently doing is not sustainable for the future unless we want to spend a lot of money supporting a group that can support this type of process. And then lastly, as we consider changes to our processes and system, we're considering how those changes would impact our move to S/4HANA, which we plan to do within the next 5 years, is my understanding. So I know there's a lot of stuff I threw out there. Is there any questions?
Yeah, I guess one thing I'd point out is that our move to S4 we're in the process of beginning to build the roadmap, but it would seem that pivoting from our current RAR process into what's going to be available by the time we get to S4 seems like it's going to be a fairly significant migration event. But it's only a chunk, right? There's all these other things that we've got to do to get ready for S4. So I think there's going to be a significant amount of work for us to fold RevRec into that larger effort, and that larger effort is only now just beginning to be defined. So
Yeah.
I'm sure there's other people that are in the same boat, right?
So I have a question here. Do you have anything which is not on RAR where you're taking revenue and doing something?
We have a lot of revenue that's not impacted by the statement, right? So yes, so like that over the top, the as is summarized speed, that's just all the revenue. So there's all sorts of revenue. Only I'm oversimplifying, but only the cellular contract revenue is heavily impacted by RAR. So the telecom promos revenue, but the scale of, like one of the reasons we were able to do the portfolio for TDS telecom promos is because it didn't matter how wrong we were. It was not going to be material, right? So it's like, right, we'll get as close as we can this way, and we're trying to be honest about it, but if we're off, it's just not material. Like the amount of the adjustment isn't big enough to matter, especially with respect to the adjustment coming from US Cellular. So yeah, but we do have other revenues that they're not contract based, so we don't run them through the engine.
So when you go to S4, you would want to just they'll still continue the way they are.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the sources are still going to be the sources, but it sounds like the SAP architecture is changing pretty dramatically. Like we got into a state of panic when they said that SD is going away, right? Like, we kind of need SD. but whatever that means, I'm not even sure what that means technically, right? So I know it's still, like, the functionality is still there, but how do we hit it, right? How do we get the stuff from flat files coming from our business unit into sales orders, right? So those are a bunch of, like, detailed questions we're going to need to address.
Yeah.
Other questions?
How long have you been live?
Oh, geez. Hey, well, actually, it's interesting. We got the system up and going, I don't know, you might have to time check me on this. I think it was 2017. We ran in parallel for several quarters because we weren't required to produce our numbers publicly, and we ran, like I said, we just kept running our regular revenue. We ran RAR in parallel and just didn't tell anyone what the answer was until we got comfortable that it was working correctly. So the pilot period in 2017, I think it was Q1 of 2018, like at the end of the first quarter of 2018, we had to report, and by then we were pretty confident that things were correct.
And you both did modified retrospective. And
yes.
Did a couple of quarters of parallel reporting to get it right.
Right, yep.
Oh, yep, that's correct, Steve. I guess I have a...
Are you out of the dual reporting window yet?
Yeah, we're just reporting.
1 year.
Yeah.
1 year.
So that ended last year.
Yeah. Yeah, we're free and clear of all the fancy accounting. Now we're just into the ugly new world.
So what was it? So you talk about this. Maybe you can summarize in a couple of bullet points. What was it that you looked at RAR, you looked at a bunch of things, and you said, yep, RAR is for me. Was it about contract modification? Was it about volume, automation? What do you think it was?
What it really came down to, there was some energy to like go to a different solution, Axway and I can't remember the names of these other companies that had like accounting hubs. Well, we only, like the solutions that were in the marketplace at the time were accounting hubs, and we only had it with a single purpose, right? It's like, why would we buy a whole accounting hub just for this one process? Maybe in retrospect, we could have used the accounting hub for other things. Like we would have learned along the way that there's other uses for it. Like we learned there's other uses for the data in RAR. But the other thing is, I mean, when it comes right down to it, like Clint's team is a team on a larger team that supports a fairly significant SAP footprint. So most of our corporate IT, at least in the application development space, is really the SAP team. So when it comes right down to it, we're kind of an SAP shop, so it's hard to like, and not that we haven't ever done like outside, we like bought IBM products and other things, but generally speaking, we tend to land on the SAP product. So it was kind of like the leader in the clubhouse. So, and yeah, given the size and complexity, like to like go buy and learn another software, I will say that the price of zero didn't hurt the business case. Yeah, so everyone else wanted $1 million, and SAP didn't want any money. So, except for all the money we had to spend to actually get it to work, right? But
of course, SAP did money.
Yeah.
But you would have had to spend the money on the software and the money to get it.
Yeah, right. And I think our conjecture was that we were going to have to spend more money on an external or a third-party product because we would have to learn how to use it as well. And we had to learn how to use RAR, but it's closer to what we normally do. So,
would you say, in your estimation, Steve, that you're probably one of the longest users of RAR, that it works well for you, it does what you need? Clearly, we're going to move in a new direction, but you feel comfortable that RAR was the right solution?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what we don't know, but like Clint mentioned, like once we get the data to it, that part of the process is fairly smooth. And I don't know if there's not a lot we can do about the situation we're in as a telco. I mean, we just have to process all these records to find the ones that are revenue impacting. I mean, on some technical level, it's not that big of a deal, right? There's a transaction code on every record. We just maintain a table of the ones that are impacted, right? And then we just filter out all of the stuff that's not impacted and sort like the impacts into the right POVs from there. But, still that's every night going through this giant thing. And then like what Clint mentioned is, yeah, there's a lot of things that happen at month end, right? Our system is booked from 24/7 for like 5 days of just running jobs to get through month end and squeezing like like all of the stuff that kind of piles up during the month for RevRec has to also fit into that window, right? So it gets pretty tricky making sure we can get all the data through. So if you get any kind of like system hiccups, like the network latency is bad or the server feels sick that day or whatever happens in the IT plumbing, there's not a lot of margin for error, right? And I guess the worst case is we don't close in the window and we have to apologize to somebody, but nonetheless, we don't want to do that, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
A quick same question on Steve. You mentioned that there are jobs and that there are this month and occurrence and other jobs going around. Now, when you look for your S4 journey, has SAP come back and given you a clear from the technical perspective that because of S4 your jobs runtime error and that would get reduced, say 5 times it would get reduced, or have they?
Well, no, not in those kind of details, but yeah, you read the literature, right? And you think, hey, that might be one of the benefits of S4. Like maybe we don't have to have teams working overnight to make sure jobs don't fall down because maybe they'll just run faster, right? I mean, so.
But have they quantified in any terms?
No, we haven't gotten that far yet. I mean, honestly, we're in like how do we even define the business case for S4? Like it's all in PowerPoint slides right now, right? And it's all internal discussion about what, how do we decide, when do we decide to build the team to start doing it? It's very, very early in like the IT folks have a roadmap, but it's not shared or agreed with really yet in the business, right? So we have the idea of what we need to do, but we don't have like the team, the detailed analysis hasn't begun yet.
Still in the time.
Yeah, planning definitely.
No.
Planning to plan is probably more accurate.
All right, last question because we need to break here and then grab some lunch and then get started at top of the hour with the next section. Frisch has a question.
You mentioned you were using a parallel before you released the RAR engine. Can you describe a little bit that parallel process that you were running?
Well, yeah, we just, since the adjustments are in different accounts, we just didn't like produce, when we went to create the statements, we just filtered those accounts out, right? So we had like, one step, we did it 2 ways, right? In RAR or in BPC or somewhere along the statement producing process, we produced two statements. One was just for internal consumption with the revenue adjusted numbers.
And I'm sorry, who is we? Is that accounting or is that IT or both?
Both. Like IT produces the data. Actually, the accounting teams put together the statements, but it's all coming out of SAP and BPC and what was then SAP Disclosure Management. So they would just basically run for a period of time, for like 3 quarters. We literally had 2 sets of books, right? One was the revenue accounting compliant books, and one was the old GAAP books. And since we weren't required to report the RevRec books yet, we just kept reporting the GAAP compliant books and just comparing, like, internally, like, do these RevRec numbers make sense? Or do we feel confident that we're actually doing the adjustment correctly? And by the time we got to the point in Q1 of 2018 where we needed to report the adjusted books, so we just stopped reporting the GAAP books and just started reporting, well, we were dual reporting for a period of years, but we had practiced dual reporting internally for, I think, 3 quarters before we had to do that publicly.
A lot of work for these guys are doing all the shaker.
Yeah, yeah.
And how many
So,
people were
folks, we're gonna try and take a break here because we're
Yeah, we're going to take about 10 to 15 minutes. It'll probably not be 15, but lunch is served, and what's going
what
on?
we're gonna try and do is bring lunch in over here to make life a little bit easier.
Okay.
So we're
In the
Dave
meantime,
and DJR.
let folks know on the phone, we're going to take about a 15-minute break, so come back around 1 o'clock, top of the hour, just a few minutes.
Well, around
Yeah, 5.
noonish, a few minutes after noon our time.
Yep.
1 o'clock.
Well, 1
Eastern.
o'clock Eastern, it'll be 7 o'clock.
So about 10,
Europe.
15 minutes to be back, or just go on mute and we'll be back.
But before we do, for the customers that are here, we wanted to just give you a small appreciation for making the trip out here, and luckily Cody is here. Jayakar was supposed to be here as well, but unfortunately he's not able to join.
You know, Pete, it might be great as you do that, maybe what the folks can do, and I think still, right? So maybe if you know, for those of the customers who are here in the room, maybe introduce yourself so everybody gets to know each other and you can start talking and networking.
But in the meantime, we're going to be handing the customer the book that Cody was able to sign. So, Cody, you want to help me hand these out to Bill? There you go. Thanks for coming.
I'm Bill Brown, and I'm with Avaya on the IT side of the equation. We've been working with SAP for quite a while to get RA up and running. We're targeting January go live at this point.
So, what are their
Frisch, and then who's
Frisch and Wadi with Avaya IT also. You've been starting for a while. I think we're more curious about your process, so I'll ask you further. Yeah, sure. Further questions.
I'm Dave Leon from Bramasol. I have a number of customers in the Bay Area, some in Utah as well.
Hi, I'm Vimal. I'm leading a SAP SD program area, and I'll be part of Harish and Bill team.
Yeah, hi, I'm Parag Modi. I'm with McAfee IT. I take care of their foundation services.
Kent Bettisworth Associates, been talking about RAR and lease accounting for about a decade. Finally actually got to put it in place in a number of companies.
I'm Susan Tanner. I'm with the RAR CoE. I'm a colleague of Cody's. So working, with y'all, here or there. So.
Steve, you guys all know me now.
Sandra Morales. I'm with Avaya, with Bill, Harash, Jamal. So working on RAR pretty soon as well. Thank you.
And Vijay Chava from Empower.
I'm Rita Birchendal from Woodward Inc. I was part of the implementation team for RAR and the analyst or IT analyst, and we implemented that at SAP.
I'm trying to go offline.
I am Sunny Chapter, part of Sophie Electron. We are in the process of migrating to S4HANA. Currently, we are operating to N4 ERP PAN and EC6 combined nutrition as an information for upcoming migration.
separately with the circuit electronics as well too, doing business system analyst, also doing system administration. So pretty much we're doing the same thing. We're migrating over to S4 down the road. So.
Great. All right. Thanks everyone for joining. All right, John, lunch update.
Lunch.
Software.
All right, so we're going to start with the first deep dive topic, which is reporting. So we've got Martin and Laura and Peter, and then Julio may be on as part of it.
Julio and I will talk a little bit about it. All right, so Martin, Vogt, are you there?
Martin, can you now hear us?
I'm here. Is Peter also and Lara here?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, they're online.
Yes. Yes, they are there. Peter and Laura, are you there?
Yes.
Yes, can you hear us?
Yep, we can hear you. Great, thanks for joining us.
So I am going to make Martin you presenter again.
Or who should we make presenter?
I think me, and then I don't know, Lara or Peter.
Would you mind going through? Or would you mind presenting the whole time, Martin? That way.
Okay, and then I change the slides. Yeah. Okay,
yeah.
we'll do.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay, then I will show my screen. Okay, I would like to start with a presentation where we are showing you some little enhancements we will provide, or enhancement we will provide for our reporting. As said before, actually, this won't be a disruptive change or whatever, that we are using Fiori and that we are going completely into, for example, management reporting, where I also think which will be a field of or a topic which have to look at in future. That is actually not the case, but we faced some requirements from customers and we want to react on them quite in a timely manner. And we think that we can provide here additional enhancements which may be helpful. As you may know, in reporting, we very often stick up to now, which will change maybe in future, to a position where we say, okay, many of the requirements there are quite custom specific. We will provide some, let's say, data sources and enhance, and we provide the data, and customers can provide come to their own reports. However, as soon as we see something which is really feasible and manageable in a to provide, then we are looking into that. And one thing is actually just again the disclaimer, because this is not yet done and just our plan. One thing we are looking at is in requirements which customer face during the auditing. And actually, as you can imagine, that is a huge there's a huge complexity in explaining revenue figures. Okay, it depends also on the industry requirements. It depends on internal customer processes. It depends on accounting policies. But in the end, we could state that the new regulation of ASC 606 and IFRS 15 creates some further complexity. Okay, if you have a simple process in place where you have just one order, not much of allocation or only few allocations, no big issues in let's say in change contract modifications, there's not much contract modification there, then it is rather a manageable task. But if you have a contract there, let's say of 1,000 POBs maybe, and if you have a lot of changes, contract modifications, I don't know, thousands of contract modifications, then you run immediately in an issue if your auditor asks how this come, what are how these figures can be explained, and so on. And as long as the auditor don't have a common approach to say, okay, it comes from SAP and we believe and trust in that, we have some problems to overcome with this explaining the figures. So it is really crucial to understand how to reproduce the results, the figures, what kind of transaction led to the figures, are the results consistent with the given accounting rules. There is so big here. Anyway, so we have, we plan some enhancements. Actually, starting from the last bullet point here, we have already a reconciliation report in place. Unfortunately, this reconciliation report is really geared to SD. And actually, yeah, and it won't work with another operational system. We plan to enhance this reconciliation key, also dealing with the hyper billing scenarios we have in place. So with ICA or PRIM or however you call it. And we will provide the capabilities to customers to enhance it to their own scenarios for non-SAP systems. That report, sorry, I can't carry on with other reports we want to provide here. We want to provide a report in better understanding the contract and POP change history. And another one which provides a better understanding of the allocation history. Actually, we looked at our company and some companies out there, and many of them have developed such a report. And we analyzed what they have, and we think that these 3 reports can be provided from standard. Because there is not a lot of custom specifics in, there are not so many, or there are not even a custom specific fields involved and so on. Many other reports are really custom specific and needs to be custom specific because there are internal processes, specific custom fields, etc. These reports may be worthwhile to have it in standard as well. And we really refer to our own SAP IT team, which is quite knowledgeable. At least some of them, like Peter, were part of the standard development. So there's a huge exchange here as well. And yes, and they've developed similar or almost the same kind of reports. And with that, I would like to give Lara or Peter the control, or tell me how they want to present now what is in these kind of reports.
Okay. Yep. Thank you, Martin. I'll take over. So hi, everyone. Okay. My name is Lara Kuhn. Peter and I will be doing the rest of this portion of the presentation. We're both from Revenue Accounting IT team at SAP. Okay, so we have these 3 reports, right? And they're used to support our R2R, our stakeholders during month-end, quarter-end, or year-end close activities. And they're very useful with this to assist with auditing. So the first report, so the reconciliation report. This is, again, our custom version, not necessarily the standard one, since we definitely have custom enhancements for our custom fields. So the purpose of this report is to ensure data consistency between sending components, again, such as SD and revenue accounting, to compare key order attributes between the operational document, so maybe a sales order, or hopefully at some point provide a contract, right? And the revenue accounting contract, or POB, to validate invoice document data with invoice correction posting entries, and to display contract liability, contract asset, and receivable adjustment balances at a contract level. This report uses data from all of the main revenue accounting tables, such as the deferral item, posting, and POB tables, just to name a few. It includes a consistency check at the contract level. This is the standard consistency check function module. And it also has a custom enhancement to compare the total contractual value, the TCV, with the net value of the operational document. Okay, any questions so far? All right.
No questions here, no.
Okay, thanks. All right, yeah, you can go to the selection screen. Thanks. All right, so I guess we'll kind of do a demo, not a live demo, obviously. We do have screenshots of the selection screen and the output. So here's the selection screen. So the company code, accounting principle, since we have multiple accounting principles here at SAP, period, and the year fields are all mandatory. The report can be further restricted by contract ID if desired. We've also included a custom work stream field in our version to help our stakeholders focus on their own line of business. So the 3 radio buttons are the execution options. As this report requires a lot of data and calculations to reconcile the information in revenue accounting, this report is executed normally in the background to populate a custom table. So once that table is populated, the report can then be run online to quickly provide contract and PUB level details that were generated during that background execution. And we also have, just below those radio buttons, we've also provided some summary view options as well. So for this demo, we're going to view the output of just one contract for 1 year worth of data. Okay, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. Okay, so here's our output. There's 1 entry per POB per posting period. And the entries that are highlighted in yellow are the contract level postings. So the columns in this screenshot, they show, they contain operational document details as well as BOB details such as the POB allocation and the invoiced amount. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. All right, this next set of columns here, they contain further invoice details such as the invoice due amount, invoice correction postings for each period, and you can also see revenue postings in that last column there. Okay, next one, please. And Peter, at any point, if you want to jump in, feel free. Okay, in this section, so we have our contract liability, contract asset, and receivable adjustment postings. The only values you see here are in the yellow entries because they're all contract level postings. And we also show the same, oh wait, go back, sorry. We also show the same postings that you saw earlier, but in local currency. And all the invoice and other postings prior were in transaction currency. So we make sure to show it in both. If you have a second local currency, then we don't currently have that in this version of the report. Okay, next one, please. All right, and the last few columns here are for the different checks we have, such as the consistency check and our custom TCV check. It also includes a check on fields which would suspend posting, such as if there's a pending conflict, if the contract is in error, or if there's a POB status or review reason, which would suspend posting. Okay, any questions about that report?
Yeah, I will put some more comment here. Okay, so for this report, because the why this report is so urgent required, no matter from the auditor point of view, or even coming to the business point of view. Okay, in the daily working, we always take for example, revenue schedule, right, from the contract management to see that how each period does the allocated amount, transaction prices, the revenue or posted revenue information there. For the only one contract or POB, this is fine. But this is not useful, or maybe very time consuming for the real auditor or business try to checking in the massive way, right? So that's why we have this kind of report to really help the business side. Even can see that, okay, I want to see something in the company code level, or even on the period level to see something which is in the overview information for them. So this is the one thing. The second is that we need to make sure that no matter from the transaction price checking or consistent checking, or even from the contract liability and the asset, which is required, that they are all passed as needed. So that's why this report is really help identify no matter the healthy or checking, that's the particular period or particularly contract, they are all good or not. So this is the really called the consistent check report, which is from the for us is from the SD side, which is reconcile from the right side, which is reconcile to the engine side for all the information. This is so important to really making that, okay, they are all consistent for the analyzing, even for the reporting purpose like that. So this is the purpose of this report, really helping right now for the auditor part, for the CFR, for the business part. They are so frequently using that. And what they did here is that in each of the closing period, for example, I do the monthly closing. After this, they will directly run this one in the background, and later they were taking this report to really analyzing that for this month they are all good to go like this. So this is the very important for the all business side for that. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, so we'll move on to the next report. This is our allocation change history report. Okay, so we received multiple requests from our stakeholders to create a report that helps track both expected and unexpected allocation changes within a contract for a certain period, or all periods for the life of the contract. So this report does that. It shows allocation changes by period, whether they are due to operational or manual changes, such as contract combination, transaction price change, manual price allocation, and residual allocation. It also links to the third report that we're going to show, the contract and POB change history report, to help further explain the cause of those allocation changes. So we'll go over that one obviously next. The information shown in this report is primarily from the change type table. So this report can be executed online in mass. So we don't have to really restrict it very much, unless of course you want to see one POB's data. Okay, next screen.
Yes, and maybe, sorry, let me take more comment here, right? And so for the old business, the main pain point for them to add explanation to the auditor is that they should give the information to explanation why the price is changed. For example, we got the allocated amount, which is changed from the 100 to 200, right? They need the reason why behind that. It's because of the transaction price change. It's because of FASB change. It's because of the menu residue from allocation or excom for allocation. This kind of the information, or if it's the change because from the change of the estimation to change of the from the change modification like that. So this report is really help the user to identify that, okay, in each of the period before they do the real posting, they will check this report and try to using this report to really try to see that's okay, the POB I will try to post it into the financial, they are all reasonable or not. So this is very important on they were using frequently to really identify that the POB they handle, or maybe the contract they handle, they are all in a good position and they needed for that. Okay, so Lara, continue.
Okay. All right. So here's the selection screen. In the screen, We have company code, accounting principle again, fiscal year and period, and those are all required. It can be executed for multiple periods in 1 year or just for one single period. We also included our custom revenue accounting group field, the workstream field again, to help our stakeholders focus on their line of business, as well as the contract ID and POB ID if you want to focus on a certain contract. The manual allocation flag can be checked to only show contracts which have manual price allocations with the contract. And then the options on the bottom are further filtering options, so the user can look for a contract that has, for example, both a total contractual value change and an SSP change, in addition to the allocation change. Okay, next one. Right, here's our output, split up because there are so many fields in it. So the output is essentially just a list of fields and their values before and after a change occurred in a period. There's one entry per POB per period, and you'll notice that the contract and POB ID cells are underlined, and this is where our link to the contract and POB change history report is. So clicking on those will execute that report to show all of the changes for a contract or a POB, not just allocation related changes. So we'll go over that next. Other than showing the before and after values for SSP, allocation, transaction price, and the residual and exclude from allocation flags, the report also includes the change mode. So looking at the first row here, you can see that this entry is for March 2019. And in the period, the POB ID listed was part of a contract combination. You can tell by the source and target contract fields that are listed there, the fact that it's a different contract ID. So it was manually moved from the source contract to the target contract on March 12th, the contract change date there. And this resulted in a change of estimates and triggered a reallocation of revenue. Now the allocation effect is approximately 17.5 thousand when it was previously 52.5 thousand. As there was no change in transaction price, SSP, or any other flags, then the reallocation was either caused by this contract combination or due to some manual allocation after that. However, you can see that the manual allocation flag in the lower screenshot there is blank, so it was clearly handled by the system. Anything else you want to add, Peter, or any questions from the group? Okay, if not, then we'll move on to the last report. All right, so finally we get to the contract and POB change history report. So this is the report we originally created to allow our users to search for various changes in a contract before we realized their main concern was actually with the allocation related changes. It allows filtering of changes by various fields, shows allocation changes in a contract, and helps users to track manual operations, such as manual allocation or manually changed POB end date, for example. Since this report reads data from the change document tables, execution should really be limited to 20 contracts at a time. And we discovered contracts with very large number of POBs should really be executed one by one, if possible. Okay, and next slide. Okay, so in this slide here, we have an example of the change history screen in SAP Business Client. Currently, this is the only way to receive contract changes. If you want to find changes which occurred on a certain date or to a certain POB, you would need to scroll through the list of changes or collapse all and expand each group of changes one by one. For larger contracts, this is a bit cumbersome to navigate, and I think you can see in the screenshot here, the scroll bar is very small, so it would take a long time to find a specific change. Okay, next slide. Okay, And again, our selection screen. So in the selection screen here, you can see accounting principle, company code, contract, POB. So accounting principle and contract are mandatory, and you can fill the other ones in as you need. And that's all you need to execute this. So now let's go to the output here. All right, and here is our output. So for this example, we're looking at all the changes for all POBs in this one particular contract. You can see contract number of the POB, change date, change time, the change transaction. So was it an operational change? Was it manual change? Was it an invoice change? Things like that. And then you can also see the different fields and even, well, we have it blurred out, but who changed it, right? If for some reason it was a manual change, you can go to that person, that user, and check with them, okay, why did you manually change the POB end date, change the allocation, whatever it happens to be. And that's about it. I mean, this is pretty self-explanatory. We have our before and after, and this, if you were to click on the contract or POB ID from that second report we showed, the allocation change history report, it would come right to this screen, already filtered based on either contract or POB ID. Okay, that's all I have. Peter, anything else?
Yes, for the change history report, right? And so Martin, we just go back. Yes. So right now, and no matter from the standard solution or even our sub-IT solution, we are all using the change history table. Okay, and this one have the one big challenge is about performance, because for this the change history table is not only using for the revenue accounting but using the other area as well. So the volume of the table is very big, and there are no index or something like that which is can be using here to try to resolve the performance. So that's why in the first slide which is showing about this report, we only limited for the 20 contract, which is try to show that. But right now, as aligned with the standard team, we have some further action which we're taking that as well later for this report. So standard team had the one note, which is the can using this note to in the body, we can try to saving the data not into the change table, change history table for the in general table. Rather than that, we will saving into the some particularly revenue accounting table for the change history. This will be a big helping to improve the performance for see the change history for the multiple contract stuff. So this is the things we'll do for the next for this report as well. So this is will be a really help for the performance, because right now for our business, they all satisfied with this report, which is output is good to them to fully understand what should be and what the changes and who did that and which field is changed like this. But they need some more improved performance for that. So that's the things we're doing for the change history report for contract and the POB stuff. Okay, that's all for my side.
So there's a couple of questions.
These reports are part of which release?
That's what I was thinking. That's
The question
I
is
just
to
asked.
Peter and Laura and Martin is to clarify the reports you've just gone through. Are they custom built for SAP IT and finance, or are they part of the standard? That's basically the question.
Oh, so right.
Go ahead,
so
Peter.
right now, for this the three report, which is we showed here, is only valid for our the report, which using for our sub IT only. Okay, and maybe Martin, you can try to comment that, right? Which is just put in the first slides that you will try to taking this into the standard functionality. Is that right, Martin?
You might be on mute.
I didn't mute. Martin, are you on mute?
Sorry, talking and talking and talking.
Yes.
No, it is not necessarily, it won't necessarily look the same in standard, but we will follow the same approach. And as we understand that this is helpful, not only from SAP IT, we've already showed it to other customers, and this kind of reports, and they think that this will help them also in their processes, in their auditing processes. And we want to productize this. I cannot tell you right now about the timeline, but we should want to do that in a foreseeable time frame, and we will deliver that via notes. I don't think.
Martin, let's just pause here so everyone understands. So this third report here was developed by IT in this format, but Martin, you're basically will be adapting this to a standard report coming out sometime later this year in a note. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. All three reports.
All three reports.
One report we have already almost similar in place with this FABIS Con. Actually, that report needs to be enhanced for other operational systems than SD. And we will provide here the content for hybrid billing, but of course, if you have a non-SAP system in place as an operational system, then you have to add here also the content. But the other two the other two reports should be available in standard for all customers. So the allocation history and the POB and contract history. But for reconciliation, of course, if you have a non-SAP system, then of course you need to do there something. But we want to that you can leverage the standard reconciliation report then also for your system.
So did I hear that the reconciliation report is already out?
I can't understand, sorry.
So Martin, Parag is asking if the reconciliation report is already part of standard.
Yeah, the FABIS Recon.
Okay, and when was that shipped? Did you understand? When is it part of some support pack, or is it a note? Is it
yes,
part
for
of the
note.
support pack?
This is for note. For the recon report is from the note which already released.
Yeah, this is already released. Yeah, this is I think was delivered in some of the feature packages we had.
In the FP7.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Peter.
We have it, right?
Yeah, we're going live tomorrow night. So hopefully. But we should have found that. We didn't find that report yet. So what's the note number?
What's the note? The note number on that, or Peter?
Once again, let me search in that. Okay.
Yeah, when you get a chance, just send me the note number and I can forward it.
Yes, I will put it in chat. Okay.
Okay. Oh, okay. You have a question? Put it in the chat.
There is one question.
Can you explain a little bit about how to make that report useful if SAP is not your source? You're feeding data into RAR from another system.
Or we can't understand, by the way.
Okay, we're going to repeat it. So the question is, the report shown here on the screen, if SAP is not your source system, is there a way to still utilize this report, be useful to the customer? That's the question from Rita.
Okay, the two last reports, allocation history and contract POB change history, that are not dependent on the operational system. Peter, correct me if I'm saying something wrong. The first one, the reconciliation, the FABIS Recon, as said, as of today, delivered in Feature Pack 7, this report is simply geared to the operational system SAP SD. We will open up this report in a way that we can also integrate other operational systems into that, or that it works also for other operational systems. We have a standard integration components like the hybrid billing. There we will deliver the required content. It will be some sort of body. There we will deliver an out-of-the-box solution. But of course, for non-SAP system, this report can then also be used, but it must be enhanced or changed, of course, from the customer, because we don't know. There is a dependency on the operational system, and we don't know the operational system itself, if it's non-SAP. But customers can use it then also for non-SAP systems. That is at least our plan.
Mm-hmm. So I just put the note for the reconciliation report there in the chat, okay? And just tell me when you can see my chat information there. The note number is the 2620672.
Say that again, Peter. 262.
2620672.
There
you go. Those of you who are in the chat, you should have that.
I put in chat already. Yeah.
Yes, I know. I said for those of you who are able to see the chat online, and I've now put it up here, so they have that. Thank you, Peter.
Okay, you're welcome. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Martin, anything else?
No, that's the plan. It's quite practicable. It's not really, as I've said, something disruptive or something which is really blowing up your mind, most probably. But it's let's say an example of how we want to help our customers and to, we will do some internal tricky things to deliver even innovations in an existing release. And we think that is not only helpful, but also required that you have a better life with the auditor.
Oh, sorry, I need to correct my one thing here. For this note is released on the FP6, not FP7. Sorry.
Even better.
Okay.
You're using this report.
Standard
other notes to correct it, things like that. Or does it break it down with the note and everything's correct?
There's one other question, Martin and Peter, you may know. So, since this note was published in FP6, the other notes that are now related to that original note, right?
That you have to put in.
Yeah. Are there any dependent notes that are updates to this note that was issued in Feature Pack 6, you know, or would that be indicated on the note, the original note?
That will be indicated on the note, and of course, for this one report, there will be a dependency. Yeah.
Yes, they have the. This is the first one which is I put there, and they have a few which is the mention about what the step you try to do, okay, to make it happen, and then after this they have some the posting note, poster note which is try to apply to fix few bug here for this, but it's not quite big change for this one, so it should be fine.
And just to be 100% clear, Peter, the transaction code is for with recon, right?
Correct.
We're using this report massively. Okay. Massively. Yeah. We can't close without this report.
So do we have 10 minutes for Bramasol?
Yep, so now it's the Bramasol portion.
There's the Bramasol portion, so I'm going to invite my colleague up because I do enough talking. I'm going to invite my colleague Julio up.
I guess Martin, Laura, and Peter, thank you for presenting. We asked you to stay on a little longer in case there's a question that comes up based on the Bramasol presentation. They're going to go through some of their disclosure reports and other reports, reconciliation reports that we have.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll put myself on mute. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Thank you. Yep. Oh, and then Martin, I sent you a note about Avaya too. They want to talk to you about the migration cockpit.
Stay online, you can see my screen. I'm just going to turn it over to you, Julio.
We're going to talk to you today about what At.Bramasol has done on top of RAR. So we have actually built a number of reports, starting with, so I'm a technical accountant by trade, so you do RAR in the system, then you hand it over to your SEC reporting team or your financial reporting team, because you have to report it, correct? Sounds about right. This goes into your 10Q, your 10K, your annual financial statements. So Bramasol started with that idea of taking what's in RAR and making it compliant for ASC 606, IFRS 15. So this is what we're going to show you today. So we always look at reports from the user perspective, because different users have different needs. If I'm the accounting supervisor at a company, I'm going to look at daily transaction reports, monthly transaction reports. If I'm the SEC reporting team, I'm going to look at my quarterly revenue statement, my contract asset, contract liability. If I'm the internal auditor or the external auditor, I'm going to focus on reconciliation reports to make sure that the data coming out matches my data being reported. So we have 3 different user groups, and we have reports built in for all 3. Just as a background of 606, so what type of information do you need? One of the key pieces of information is you need the disaggregation of revenue. So as you have goods and services for every company, you have to tell your readers of your financial statements how you as a company are disaggregating your revenue. Do you do it by goods, by services? Do you do it by geographic region? That's one of the requirements of FASB. Second one is, as you go into giving goods and services to customers and you're recognizing revenue, you have to recognize a cost to obtain or cost to fulfill. So if you have a lot of commissions, it's going to be a cost to obtain. If you have mobilization costs in an environment, you're going to have cost to fulfill. And those have to be now deferred over the life of the revenue recognition process. At a general level, you have performance obligations. You have to tell your readers, how are you combining your goods and services into performance obligations? We talk about contract asset, contract liability. As part of 606, just like deferred revenue is now called contract liability, contract asset. And you have to report that as part of reporting transactions. Significant judgments is what we call the qualitative end of financial reporting. So as far as data points, you have disaggregation of revenue, cost to obtain, cost to fulfill, performance obligations, and contract balances, contract liability. Then you're going to talk about your significant judgments. So what are some of the assumptions that I'm using to combine my goods and services? How am I recognizing my contract asset? How am I recognizing my contract liability? That's written in as a qualitative data point. So what have we done? Well, at the top level, you're going to have your revenue recognized. Then you're going to, and so that's going to be in your financial statements, in your 10Q, 10K. If you're a private company, you're going to do it in your financial statements annually. Then we all know, as part of 606, you do have a new footnote disclosure, which you have to talk about qualitative, quantitative, and some of them are being mixed. So from your income statement, you're going to have revenue. In your balance sheet, you're going to have this new line item, contract asset, contract liability. So what has Bramasol actually done? So some really good accountants 3 years ago went through the financial ASC 606 standard and basically mapped the data points in RAR into each of the requirements to comply with ASC 606. So if you look on the screen there, you will see every report we built. So the first, in the middle of the screen, you see 606-10-50-4A. What does that mean? That's actually the FASB data point that says, for this report, this is what data point you need. So for every required data point in the ASC 606, we built a report for. So basically, when I used to be SEC reporting accountant, if I were using this report, I would run these reports at the end of the quarter to make sure that I have my footnote disclosure and to validate against transactions at the transaction level. The first set of reports are summary reports. We have short-term, long-term, deferred revenue, the revenue report, which is called a waterfall report, and the document flow report. So from our perspective, those are from the user perspective, right? So we have the SEC reporting team. They're going to pull those reports that has all the FASB guidance on them. If you were the operational accountant in a company, or you were the internal auditors, you would start running the deferred revenue report, short-term, long-term, RAR summary report. Why? Because the nature of these reports starts with goods and services within RAR, and it goes all the way up to what's reported in your financial statements. And they're all clickable, so you can double-click on, I recognize $100 million in Q3, and it takes you down to the performance obligation, takes you down to the goods and services, tells you what has been recognized, what is yet to be recognized. What is yet to be recognized falls on your balance sheet. So we feel it's a comprehensive report that can help you not only do your financial reporting for your external audience, but internal as well, as you do transaction reporting on a monthly basis. Some customers of ours run these reports on a daily basis to understand what transactions are being generated out of RAR. So we feel it really applies to all different audiences. Just to get some more granularity, again, on the left side, you see the actual ASC 606 reference. You see the contract name, description, the description of the report name, and then you see what it looks like a screenshot of what it actually looks like in the system. John, anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, I think the importance is that we've been co-developing and working with the SAP team, Martin, Volkmar, and those guys on these reports, so they're constantly updated and integrated through that organization. And this is a report, again, designed to be, at the end of the day, you have to report. Right? You have to do all of your FASB reporting. This is designed to be a single place that you can do all of that. They are not, I will repeat because I look at my friend back in the back there, it's not what anyone would say is this out of the box. There is no such thing in SAP as out of the box anything. We've done over 40 or 50 projects for revenue recognition, and we know that there's no such thing as out of the box. HP is about as far as out of the box as you get, right? But what they are is most companies are using these as a starter to get you 60–70% of the way there, and you start with this and you do development on it. Anything, Jeff, you wanted to say about it?
No, you said it perfectly. Thank you, John.
Questions?
Why would it be that way? Because the company-wise, even though these are the 10 or 8 required disclosures, it would differ because of the company operations. That's why it would be different, or why would it be different?
Say that again.
The question is, like, we know that these are the 8 buckets where it has to be for disclosure management required, right? And we have to go like this companies and you. So it's because that business processes are different. That's why you have to configure it different for this report.
Correct.
Or
so every company has different goods and services. Some companies have warranty, some companies do not. Some companies have variable consideration, some companies do not. So as you go into RAR, you have to configure your business scenarios to RAR. So once you do that, these reports come on top of your configuration for your business environment, and we pull it out to be compliant with the requirements. That makes sense?
And because we know how RAR works, we base these on a basic, think of it as a basic building block. On top of that, you would then take the customizations and configurations that you've done, and we add them in, and we customize it, quote unquote, or adapt it to your solution. So they're 60–70% of the way there, Jeff?
70 to 75.
70 to 75. I'm unusual for a sales guy. I'm being conservative. No, it's 100% out of the box now. He's going to throw things at me if I say that.
So what's the note number for you?
It's not a note, it's a Bramasol. Third-party product. No, BRAMASOL. But we continue to, one thing, so again, we continue, some of what we've done with Martin and Volkmar and those guys is step into a space where we help partner, where they don't really, they're investing in other areas, and this is a place that they've asked us to invest and deliver those services. We also do it for contract and lease management, which we have a complete set of those two if you use CLM for SAP.
Question. What if you don't run all your revenue through revenue accounting?
So, all of the revenue.
Yeah, so like for example, let's say,
TDS,
TDS, they have some of their revenue going directly into their general ledger and it bypasses RAR. So what happens in that case with these reports?
But they have no impact, right? So the disclosures are impacted contracts.
So in that scenario, I'm assuming you would pull from the general ledger whatever is required from a disclosure perspective from that non-RAR system. So that's a bit of a
yeah, so because we can supplement.
Yeah, you have to map it.
So in some cases, let me answer that. So in some cases, because I have to think about your question. So in some cases, you are not running through RAR because it's not relevant for RAR. You sell something, collect some money, it's not relevant, so you don't care. In some cases, you're running it through, let's say that your business, I mean, you're A&D, so you know this, right? Some cases you might be using RAR for 70% and RA results analysis for 30% of your stuff. We've worked with customers who can kind of meld that all together through this process.
Okay. So
They are designed primarily, built primarily for RAR, but we can integrate.
the additional configuration that will come with these reports. Okay.
Other questions? Other questions?
I just had a question on the name of the company, Bramasol. What was the? And this is for you, maybe you know that.
What's the name of Bramasol? So is it more of a question of who is Bramasol, or what's the name?
I mean, what's the name, what the inspiration behind his name,
Just because it has, do you think it has some sort of connection to a deity in Indian?
I could just think about
It actually has
nothing to do with shaving cream either, so they give you a little bit older
Bramasol has, I'll tell you, I'll finish with where the name came from, but it has, apparently there's a Russian nuclear missile system called Bramasol or something like that. Apparently there is an Indian god called Brahma, which Brahma god, Sol is sun, so there could be a connection there. And then finally there's a real reason. There was a book called Under the Tuscan Sun written, and the place, the estate in Italy was called Bramasol, and the owner of Bramasol loved that name and Americanized it by dropping the E and calling it Bramasol.
True stuff. And so Bramasol's been around for 23 years. We're probably, we'll say P, although we say D, but we'll say D or a leading partner in the space of revenue recognition. We've done 40 plus projects. We do finance. We've been around 23 years, so we've got a lot of co-innovation work. We've been working with you now for what, 6-7 years. RevRec, and we've been working with the team in Waldorf now a long time. We've worked with a couple of small companies like McAfee and TDS, HP.
All right, so I think we're on now to the next topic. So Martin, Peter, and Lara, we want to thank you for participating and carving out some time. I know it's late where you are. I think Martin for sure. I'm not sure about Peter and Lara, but you guys can sign off. Thanks again for your help.
Oh, and by the way,
thanks for having us.
Carrie back here is available for anybody who wants. At the end, when we're done,
Thank you, Martin.
She can do some demos. But thank you, Martin and Laura. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day. All right, now we're going to talk about some S4 migration, right?
Okay. So which presentation?
And then we'll go to Cody, Susan, and I'm not sure if Roshni will join us, but and then we'll wrap up with Parag. He'll wow us with the McAfee team.
Okay, so it's presentation.
It's on to you. You're on the S4. No, John and Julio. Oh, Steve. No. Okay. No. Sorry. Steve and John. Shuai.
There you go. All right. That'll be good now. why don't you introduce yourself?
So I'm Steve Stone with Bramasol. I'm the professional service director that's in the field. With respect to migration, obviously, I'm sure many of you, I know many of the accounts, early adopters of RAR and went through your migration or still in many respects doing true-ups on your migration path. The challenges that we've seen, I think that hit everybody is fundamentally data around your business models and understanding what business scenarios you're putting into RAR, trying to run through RAR. We've had clients within the field that have taken RAR at the same time that their business teams are adopting more fancier ways or more complex ways of combining and bundling services with hardware, with software over time. We've had loyalty programs that are coming in midstream. In fact, we're doing a project now where we're integrating with a third-party marketing loyalty program into ECC or directly into RAR. The credit points and carry points both in ECC or in the financial path, but also that are in the social media path, so it has a different swing to it as well. And each of these creates, okay, how do we get the information in there, Steve? Is it in a ECC platform? Is it in an ERP platform? Or is it just going into RAR? And at the end of the day, how do we true these up when they go into posting? And this is just straightforward even before we consider an S4. And you consider looking at the change in technology from ECC to S4, and then where to go from merely a year, 2 years ago, where it was, we got to make the date, don't touch anything in our upstream system, just accommodate for it downstream in RAR, to now really rethinking how, order to cash, record to report, even record to pay processes work and how they should work in parallel with revenue recognition. And those challenges where we have accounts that are venturing forward on S4, and looking at either converting RAR out of an ECC system, which is recommended by SAP, or trying to go direct, in many cases requiring from an ECC version or a standalone version of RAR into an S4 version of RAR, which is a customized interface or customized, basically taking apart the pieces in this end and reassembling them over here, disassociating them with any type of transaction in S4 until we can close out those open orders and begin the normal process path for migration. So these are the consideration challenges that we see going forward. The migration cockpit, I think, again, is pretty insular to the straightforward recommended path from SAP. But I think as we work over time and look at S4, it really is how do we go from a data point in between, how do we clean up data in the process of moving across? And I'd be curious to hear stories in the group here in that data cleanup period, going from ECC over to S4, and then putting it in the system. And later on, how do we, I think was hinted at this morning, once you have that stable state, when you do acquisitions coming in, what type of migration tools carry over or lend themselves to extend beyond the initial either ECC or S4 or project? So those are some of the questions that we have and we're looking at and considering across the field. Does anybody in the room want to comment, or I see heads nodding, or with respect to their own migration stories or challenges that they're seeing?
What are the possibilities that SAP is going for the theory route? We saw in prior to lunch some presentations there, the cockpit of that day-wise revenue recognition, and then that was a theory I've shown over there for that.
And the 1909.
1909, yeah. So what happens to, new customer, okay, they can adapt, those are going with the theory and they adapt,
Yeah, go to 1909 and they get more theory.
So they will discard the upgrades and all of the existing non-theory apps.
Actually, I mean, on the non-theory, I don't know. We have to ask Martin what the plan is on the theory for the 1.3. We'll ask him that question. Try to get you an answer offline, because I don't think
Steve. But I don't have an answer on that, but it does raise a thought, though, because one of the other challenges we have is early adopters, such as many in the room, trying to get upgraded before they do that migration over. That's the other big push for people, is to say, hey, remember all that customization we put in? Because if the functionality wasn't there, and now instead of trying to bring that complexity forward, let's really true it up and let's remove the customization. Let's take advantage of what SAP has done over the last year and a half in terms of really moving the RAR product forward and providing features and functions. Let's true up, let's get that. While we're doing that, let's do some real data cleanup as well. And now that really puts you in a good position to step off of ECC into S4 and really look at that project, because you're really going from what we term comply, optimize, and transform. You're landing somewhere between the optimization and the transformation. Your business teams, if they're looking at S4, it's not just an IT exercise, which we see a lot of aspirations as such from IT, but at the end of the day, the business case doesn't support it. It has to have a business impact. So you're going to get some level of transformation there as you go forward.
Steve, did you want to say something?
Well, actually, are there any customers, companies that have gone live with RAR and ECC and then subsequently transitioned to S4?
Are there any of those, Schaak?
No way!
Hello. What is your question?
Has anybody gone live in RAR ECC and then moved ECC to S4?
And is it easy?
We at HP. So we implemented RAR on ECC first. We went live last year, and now slowly we are moving to S4.
Yeah, so HPE chose to move to an ECC system. We'll jump over to the customer in a second. They chose to move to ECC version of RAR. And then they are in the process of moving all into S4HANA. They have gone live on 2.1, 2.0 and 2.1, so they are live running some of their transactions through. Is that correct, Schaak?
Yes, correct.
And Zach, so Schaak and Zach both work on the HP.
Yes.
The complication for them is, again, this is the conversation you and I had a couple of weeks ago, right, in Madison, which is, if you're thinking about this, think very carefully about what you're doing from an S4HANA. It's as much an S4HANA discussion as it is a RAR discussion. What are you trying to accomplish? What, you know, as Covey would say, and I repeat again and again, begin with the end in mind. Think about what you're trying to accomplish in your S4HANA migration. When we first started the HPE project, we came up with the idea of, what do we call it, clean versus complex? Clean transactions, clean migrations. Every single time we turned around, there was a business unit that said, hi, no, we need ours customized. We need something different. We've acquired Aruba networks. We've done this, we've done that.
Or we're not ready.
Or we're not quite ready for that. Or, you know, we decided instead of doing it by region, we're going to do region and product. We're going to leave this country out and put that country in. It will make it a lot harder. So the biggest advice is to think very, very carefully about what you want to accomplish in your S4HANA migration. What is it you plan to do? Think about finance, but also in RevRec, and we talk about this all the time, RevRec is probably one of the most complicated processes out there. It touches almost every single aspect of SAP, whether it's through the entire order to cash process, but it touches inventory, it touches every single aspect. Just think very carefully about it. And we're doing workshops. We came to see Steve. We do some workshops. We've got some experiences of things that work pretty well because people started on S4, and then we have some others that are very complicated. So let's follow up on that. Pete, I know wants to do. We have a large customer.
Roshni, yeah, she's online.
Roshni, so I have to promote Roshni. And who has the deck?
Roshni.
Roshni. All right, Roshni, we are going to promote you.
Roshni CoE.
We'll let her.
Hold on, Roshni.
There she is.
Here we go. Make you an organizer. Hello, Roshni, can you hear us?
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes, and now I'm going to promote you to presenter.
Perfect.
So we're now going to go through a presentation by our RAR Center of Excellence, and we also have Susan and Koti in the room that may make some comment or be able to answer questions. But we'll let Roshni introduce herself.
Roshni, you should be able to present when you're ready.
All right, give me 1 second.
I know, I was going to say, yeah.
All right, I'm sharing my PowerPoint presentation. Let me know when you can see my screen.
Can see.
Okay, perfect. All right, so my name is Roshni Frisch.
Roshni,
Mm-hmm.
you may want to change your presentation mode because we're seeing the notes style.
Oh, really?
I'm not quite sure how to help you with that.
Yeah, is this still the note style?
Yes, and I can see you could take, so two things. Number one is go up to the
Display settings.
display settings.
No, go back.
Go back.
Go back. Present.
Do present. Okay, now display settings.
The top of your screen.
In the middle.
Of your current screen, there's display settings and the.
I'm not seeing a button.
Oh, she's seeing the.
I'm seeing just the presentation screen right now. Yeah.
Okay.
All
Well,
right, I guess we'll just have to roll with this.
the only other thing is to go over to the box for the webinar, because now you're an organizer, and click that tiny little orange and white arrow. There you go. That's a little better. Very good. And that might just work out just doing that better. You can see it better.
Yeah, this is fine too.
Okay, this is fine, Roshni. Go ahead.
This is fine? Okay, all right. Perfect. So I'll go ahead and get started. My name is Roshni Frisch. I'm with the IFRS 15 CoE with SAP in the DBS consulting organization. And what we wanted to walk you through today was a software remix scenario for a large global high-tech company. So if I go to the use case overview, so basically the scenario is that a software company enters into an agreement with customers for software contracts that allow for remix rights. So the contract itself is set up for a predefined number of years at a fixed price, but the customer has the ability to change the software licenses that they select on a quarterly basis throughout the duration of the contract. So the contract value never changes. The contract is going to be invoiced each year for the predefined amount, but each quarter the customer can go in and reselect different licenses based on the pools and caps that have been set up at the contract start point. And so the associated revenue for this contract is going to then divide out into two different components. It's going to divide out into licenses, which will earn on an event-based basis, and maintenance, which is going to earn on a time-based component over the duration of the contract. So there were a couple of key challenges and issues that we had with setting this up, and one is that the prospective modifications will occur on the revenue contracts every single time that a remix occurs. So every time the customer goes in and reselects a different set of software licenses, it's a prospective modification on the revenue contract, and this can happen quarterly based on how this particular scenario was defined for this particular software company through the duration of the revenue contract. So the revenue contract can go on for years, and every single month or quarter as predefined, the customer can rechange what products they're actually using on the contract. And in addition to that, there was a royalty transfer component. So each of the software licenses that the customer selects has a different IP owning entity. And at the end of the month, once the revenue is earned for both the license and the maintenance component, the royalties will then need to be transferred to the correct IP owning entity outside of the selling organization. So that was also treated as a percentage of the revenue earned at the end of the month. And just to kind of layer in additional complexity onto the scenario, the customer also decided that they wanted to see this as a foreign currency contract. So they wanted the initial contract to be in a foreign currency outside of the company code that we were using. And then in addition, so this kind of turns our scenario into a couple different of layers with the currency in that you have the initial foreign currency contract, and then when you do your IP transfer for your IP revenue transfer at the end of the month, you end up having an additional currency conversion step. So we designed all of this using standard SAP and to comply with IFRS 15 and IFRIC 22. And let me kind of walk you through the process and the architecture of what we designed. So from the process overview standpoint, the basic agreement is created, the contract is set up, and then the contract is then replicated into S/4HANA. And then each quarter, the customer has a portal that they can log into and change and define what licenses they want to use based on the caps that have been predefined in their original contract. So the customer has the self-service portal. They're actually able to go in and updates the quantities themselves based on what they want to use. And then after that, those quantities are then updated into our S/4HANA contract, and then they are replicated into our RAR contract. So you can kind of see down here is where the RAR box kind of comes into play with the trigger of the revenue recognition. And then after RAR is finished, then the royalty transfer will also occur. And in the meantime, other things are going on in the background in the sales side for the customer, for the entitlement triggerment, the fulfillment of the license key generation, and all of that. So I'm going to go on to the next slide, which is the basic architecture. So what we set up for this customer was we set up entitlement management, the SAP Sales Cloud, and S/4HANA to all integrate together to be able to resolve for this complex customer requirement. So you can see the basic agreement will sit in the Sales Cloud, which contains quantity caps, pool limits, things like that, based on what the original contract setup is. And then those are also replicated into SAP SD, which is in this box. And here we have the basic agreement, the maintenance contract, remix contract, as well as all of the billing will go on in this box. And then as you can see, that's going to flow into RAR. It's going to become our revenue contract as well as our performance obligations. And then at the end of the month, once the revenue has earned, it goes into conditions contract management, which is also another SAP tool that we use for, can be used for transfer pricing. And so we have conditions contracts set up in there so that the intercompany settlement can occur automatically on a monthly basis. So let me dive a little bit deeper into the revenue accounting and reporting box up here, where we have the revenue contract and POBs set up. So on our left here, we have the basic agreement in SD, which generates a maintenance contract as well as remix contracts and billing documents out of those. So RAR, on the RAR side, we were able to leave the basic agreement out. We did not need that for our purposes. We were able to take in just these blue highlighted boxes. So the maintenance contract and the initial remix contract were replicated into RAR and actually combined into one revenue contract. So we used a standard BADI to be able to enable this automatic contract combination feature. So we set that up for our purposes from the reference ID field in SD so that all of these different contracts would merge into one revenue contract. And then the billing documents, as they're generated and flow in, will also automatically generate and flow into RAR. So on our side, the key performance obligations that we wanted to include were for the maintenance as well as for the license. Since they earn differently, the license will earn immediately on an event-based manner, and the maintenance will earn over time. So we have our contracts configured to pull those in. Now let me show you. This is kind of an example of what it looked like in the system when we finished prototyping it. So you have your basic agreement in SD at the top, and then underneath it you have, right here it shows your initial remix contract along with the invoice, and then under the basic agreement later on you would also add on additional remix contracts and the maintenance contract as well. So these documents will automatically flow into RAR, and by the reference ID is how we have set up the BADI to do the automatic contract combination so that the revenue contract will all merge for everything pertaining to this one customer revenue contract, even though it pertains to multiple SD contracts. And then for the license performance obligations, those were all set up to earn immediately at the time that the license keys were generated. So what you can see here is we've got our quantity is 100% fulfilled, our revenue is earning for these pieces. And one of the features that we use for the license performance obligations is actually kind of a relatively new feature coming out of RAR standard, which is the acceptance date trigger. So when the acceptance date is populated on the contract, which is something a lot of software customers will use to, when the license key is generated, they will update the acceptance date on the line item in the SD contract. That will automatically trigger and send a SD fulfillment item into RAR, this SDFI. So once that acceptance date has been maintained, the fulfillment item generates, and that triggers the fulfillment of these performance obligations automatically on the RAR side. So that can all be set up and tied and integrated automatically into your licensing process. And then for the maintenance performance obligations, these are the maintenance performance obligations tied back to the software licenses. And if you recall, these actually are designed per our customer requirement to go out over time through the entire duration and life cycle of the contract. So you can see here, these are actually split out to earn on a monthly basis rather than earn immediately on an event-based manner like the licenses are. So the interesting thing is when the remix actually happens. So when the customer goes in and makes that modification to the contract. So this is a screen of what the performance obligations look like after a modification occurs. And I'm showing you on the time-based, the maintenance POBs here. So what happens is originally the performance obligations are set up to run over time. And once the first 3 periods have earned, so here you can see 7, 8, 9 have earned. In period 10, a prospective modification was occurred on this contract. So instead of selecting a license quantity of 2, the customers decided, you know what, I need 3 licenses instead because I'm finding more of a demand for this particular software. So what we did was we set it up so that that piece would feed from the entitlement management system all the way from the SAP Sales Cloud. It's going to feed into S/4HANA, update our SD contract, and then that's going to replicate over into RAR. And what it does is it closes out the original performance obligation. So you can see that it finishes earning in period 10, and then a new performance obligation is generated for the remaining months. So the first month that this new performance obligation is relevant is for period 10 of 2018. And that's the new performance obligation with the new effective quantity that's going to be carried forward through the remainder of the life cycle of the contract, unless, of course, a new remix occurs, which we would expect most likely will happen in the next quarter. Then this will again update and change and shift again and make the same modifications onto the contract going forward. So you have a live view of your contract and your allocations for all of your license quantities for each month, and you can kind of see how they shift and change over time going forward. So basically, this resulted in an end-to-end solution. S/4HANA, entitlement management, cloud platform were all integrated, and the key for this scenario is that the customer had a lot of complex requirements. They had bundling of product groups. They had different IP owning entities. Each product is owned by one of 5 different IP owning companies, which needs the revenue transferred at the end of the month after the earnings. They also had a complex requirement of the split of the software, where you would earn part of your software on a time-based and part of it on an event-based, whether it was for the licensing portion or for the maintenance portion of the software. And then also with the foreign currency contracts, that was also another complex addition kind of baked into the requirements. And what we did with this prototype was We implemented this based on SAP standard with minimal extensions. So we, on the RAR side, we implemented one baddie. Everything else was done standard. There were no modifications or implicit enhancement used in the design. And we presented the full integrated scenario from end to end, from the Sales Cloud all the way through to the royalty transfer to the customer in a live demo, so that they could see and get comfortable with the solution itself. And kind of the way we went about in building this solution was working with the customer to define the scenario, do the question and answers with them. And then what we do after that is do a detailed Excel model build of the scenario. So for all of the different licenses and all the different quantities, we take the performance obligation SSPs, we take the transaction price and mock up what that is supposed to look like every month of the contract, especially once the remixes come in and the perspective changes start happening, so that you have an idea of what the end result should be. When you get into the system and start configuring, then you know, okay, are my numbers adding up correctly? Is my foreign currency actually changing the way I expect it to based on actual exchange rates every month that are shifting? So what we did in the system setup was we were able to kind of leverage that Excel model, go back, and during the functional testing, do the tweaks and adjustments that were needed until we got the numbers to tie out penny by penny to make sure that we had all of these complex requirements kind of checked off, and that we were still remaining compliant with IFRS 15 and IFRIC 22. And so when we finally presented the end-to-end process demo, we were able to prove out that the Excel model that we built, several months previously is still tying out numbers-wise to what we're actually seeing in the fully integrated system once it's built and ready. And so I would say the key benefits of this scenario would be that it's automated end-to-end using batch jobs and standard SAP, so that users don't have to manually go in and do all of these changes on a monthly basis. They'll happen automatically. The customer goes in and selects their licenses, and the rest of it is taken up by automatic SAP processing from then on. So then at the end of the month, you just go in and you validate your results. Also, by using SAP Standard, we were able to integrate scalability into the model so that when new products or business models come in, the system will be flexible enough that you can start adding in those new products without having to redesign and reconfigure your system. And also, we've got the transparency throughout the life cycle by having all of this replicated in all of the various architectural systems. So you have that revenue stream that you can see from month one, day one, what happened, all the way through 12 or 15 modifications to the end of the contract. So with that, I want to turn it over and see if there's any questions.
Any questions, Cody, Susan, any comments?
Cody's going to add some thoughts. Yeah, basically, this whole scenario, I think it involves with multiple modules, as Roshni explained. SAP's entitlement management, then we have a contract management, then we have SD, then we have RAR, then FI, and some other inventory modules. And this is all based on the portfolio and very complex criteria. As she explained, there are about 105 different independent vendors that are involved with these royalties. This company owns these portfolios of their own products as well as third-party products. And customer has the flexibility every quarter. They can go mix and match the licenses they want to enable. And based on that, the royalties will shift from third party to their own product to the third parties. I think it is a mix and match, and it's a pretty complex criteria. We are able to accomplish everything within a 15% tolerance from a custom code point. So I think we are pretty happy with what we achieved. The compliance, enablement, and also the end-to-end solution, I think fully automated with very less customer intervention. So customer was very happy. Ultimately, this is a European customer. and very complex criteria, and SAP RAR is able to handle this, I think.
So when they are mix and matching the software, how they are tracking, how are we updating the original order, or how it's happening?
Yeah, these are all.
Every month you create a new contract, or?
Yeah, basically what Roshni explained earlier is that when the customer has a chance to go into the customer portal and update the licenses there, and they say, I can take 3 licenses instead of 2 licenses for this quarter, and then they should be able to terminate the existing POB and add a new POB into the same contract. So that way the revenue is shifted from one POB to a different POB.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, the customer has a portal that they can log into. So basically what they see in there is what they're entitled to with their pool caps. So at the start of the contract, they're given, you can access, Adobe software. Here you can access Photoshop and Lightroom and cloud products, and then you select the number of licenses or something, some kind of example like that. Within there, and then the customer doesn't see any of the follow-on processing. They're just selecting quantities of Photoshop is essentially it.
So is that how you keep it prospective as opposed to switching to retrospective?
Yeah, so the prospective versus retrospective is actually handled in the way that we set up the SD and the RAR contract.
We said that there was just 15% of add-on work done. This was majorly because in this scenario, the basic agreement and everything is in SAP Sales Cloud. If it was like, say, Salesforce or Microsoft CRM, you would feel that the additional integration and work would be required with that, or there are like standard add-ons for those kind of other vendors for with this scenario.
So I'll let Roshni answer that. Roshni, the question is, right now we have a SAP portfolio here in this whole end-to-end landscape, right? We have the SAP Cloud, we have SAP RAR, we have SAP GL. Everything is SAP's entitlement management. But the question is, let's say if the source system is not SAP, if the source system is something else, which is a Salesforce, CRM, or something else that is feeding these inputs to RAR. Is there a customization? Is there a huge customization need to be changed? What is the gut feel from that point, from an integration of non-SAP to SAP?
Yeah. I think basically you would just have to enable the connections and the pointers to feed from. So in this case, like you said, it's Sales Cloud. But if this was Salesforce instead, you would just feed the basic agreement from Salesforce into SD using, the connector tools available already. So it would be fairly easy to swap that out. And then from then on, the process remains the exact same, and it wouldn't change.
Thank you.
Just one question. This is Steve Stone for Bramasol. With respect to the Excel modeling, did I hear you right that you actually did the whole end-to-end modeled in Excel first before you stepped into the actual application?
Yeah, that's correct. Exactly. Yeah. So what we did was when we initially defined the scenario with the customer, we built the Excel model for every single product, for every single product grouping and cap as well. And then we modeled what that would look like month by month with the T accounts. And then when the remix happens, we did another prospective modification entirely in Excel for all of those products, all of the revenue, all of the royalty transfers, all of the foreign exchange rates. So we had this giant, massive Excel spreadsheet with all those numbers and all those T accounts. And then at that point, once the customer said, okay, these are the revenue results we're expecting by product, by month, especially after the remix occurs, that's when we started the actual system build and configuration. So we use that as the basis for our design.
Roshni, this is John Froelich. How are you? I have an interesting question based on the fact that you did that, and then I'm going to wrap it up because we do need to get to Parag and we're running out of time. So if you did it in Excel, which is what everybody says, I'll just do this in Excel, and you built a beautiful, shiny Excel model, and then you moved it over to RAR, did you guys do any benchmarking to see how much better RAR did than just having to do this in Excel? Do you have a sense of time savings? I mean, that would be such a powerful.
So yeah, no, I don't have the exact amount of time it took us, but it took us hours and hours to build the Excel file for this one scenario for the first 4 months. So it took a lot of manpower to build that, and then the beauty of when you actually put it in RAR and have your configuration set up correctly is that then it's just automatic. The batch job runs and you see the number at the end once you're done with the setup.
Yeah, if you see the Excel, you will be lost.
Yeah. If you see the Excel, you'll fall over.
And imagine the opportunity for error in that one. Okay, and I'm not. This is. Thank you very much, but Pete would say, in the interest of keeping things moving. Thanks, guys. Any other questions? Please send them. You can send them directly to Cody, to Pete, to myself, and we'll get them to the group, and we'll do some more questions. So thank you very much. Mr. Parag, let me get your, thank you, Roshni.
Yep, thanks.
So while the presentation is being pulled up, let me quickly reintroduce myself. My name is Parag Modi, work with McAfee. I lead the enterprise back office operations, so SAP and of course RAR kind of rolls up under me. That's kind of the background. And so from a journey perspective, right? We can kind of start with the first one. There you go. All right. So we started the journey of where we were. So very quickly, we use SAP pretty heavily from our sales and distribution perspective, right? SD module to capture all the orders, contracts, and stuff. We use SD RevRec too quite a bit around all the the recognition of revenue that is used. We use RevPro for our 605 accounting too, right? That was kind of the previous. So the way we did it was you set up your orders and contracts in SAP. You have the initial allocation by SAP. You post your entries by SAP into the VP-REV table for people who are very enthusiastic still of using SD RevRec. And then of course all that data used to flow into RevPro, which used to then calculate the 605 and post delta adjustments, right? So in a nutshell, it was comparatively, and don't get kind of disillusioned by the small process as-is process and the to-be. The as-is process was complex around multiple reconciliations because data used to move between SAP, even some other platforms from where we used to capture orders and move them into RevPro, and again the ensuing journal entries, some posted by VF44 and some posted by RevPro, to kind of finally come to your 605 numbers. The entire reporting again was done by BW because clearly SAP couldn't handle that kind of volume from a reporting perspective, especially waterfall. So what was the RAR process? And that's why I kind of warned everybody, right? Don't get we still use SD to capture all our SAP SD to capture all our orders and contracts, and then of course we have processes around customer and kind of consumer business and enterprise businesses. So as you know, McAfee is a device to cloud and security company, right? So we secure the device to the cloud, everything end to end, right? Pretty big with that, and of course predominantly dealing with the consumers and consumer very high volume business, 40,000-50,000 orders a day, contracts a day. That we did not move to RAR. Enterprise, comparatively less volume, is the segment that we moved to RAR, right? So again, moving back to the flow, SD orders, capture them. So we have some hardware business as well. So there was some PGI involved, customer invoices, everything coming in from the SD to FI, all at SAP. Now, RAR basically came in from capturing all the SD contracts, order data, and of course going through the RAR engine to capture all your performance obligations, the SSPs, and all the logic around, your compounding, to basically, allocations and all that good stuff, and then posting back into finance from RAR, right? And this is kind of the short and sweet process that we follow at RAR, in RAR. So any questions at this point?
So you mentioned that just because of the volume, we did not move other than the enterprise. That was it subject to 606? Still you compromised over there, or what was the case?
So for a consumer business, there's no difference between 605 and 606. It's very simple. There's no allocation involved. Though we are now seeing a lot of intersection between consumer and corporate, and that's where we have to bring those into RAR, right? Eventually, our thought is to move everything to RAR, because this is predominantly a subscription model, right? So you would want to have that go and recognize. So we use SD RevRec for the consumer, which is the most straightforward. No allocation needed. Hey, order comes in, therefore take revenue month by month, right? But corporate is a lot more complex. So you have a lot of bundles and super bundles and all that stuff, right? Yeah. The one thing which I can share about our implementation is I actually take pride in this. It's a very unique implementation. Why I say this, and I would be happy to hear from other customers too. This is a conversion we did retrospective. When I say retrospectively, if you look at the diagram, it's fairly complex actually, seems, but I'll try to make it as simple as possible. So physically, we went live in Q1 of 2019. Yeah. But if you look at it, our transfer date, and for people who are on RAR already, they would know the transfer date. But basically, effective date was the first day of 2018, not 19. So we went live in physically being in 2019 quarter end, but with a date of 1/2018, right? So it was complete retrospective. And in a nutshell, what we did was, if you look at the diagram now, so we were like, if you think about this, and I'm moving backwards from 19, moving backwards, right? So we went live in 19, all the way. We had to convert all of 2018 again, meaning we converted out of 2017, and we had to reclose 2018 every month, right? So open Jan 2018, reclose it by 606. And we had to do this because one of our primary requirements was to have 606 reporting for 2018 as well. That was a challenge thrown at us. I know it was not the most, we had a couple of options, but finally we went out with this and we could execute it, right? So yeah, moving back again. So we went with the transfer of 17, and how we made that happen was we started doing a lot of mocks. We did 3 mocks. So if you look at from starting from Q1 of 2018 to Q4 of 2018, right? We did 3 mocks, basically trying to replicate this. So first was the POC. The main challenge was around contract changes, right? So think about this, right? A contract which you created in 2018 with $1,000 value could change to $1,200 in 2019. Now, the primary challenge that we faced was that the change log was not captured within RAR, because it was already, when you're in 19, it takes 1,200 as the value. And that was one of the biggest challenges. So we had to kind of be a little innovative there to figure out what was the, massive amount of, if there's a massive change or not. And we luckily found out it was not material for us, and we could take this approach. So that was the number one challenge in doing this. And of course, the second challenge was around, kind of doing in mock, right? During the mock POC, we could iron all this out. So anybody who's trying to do something like this, really recommend a lot of mocks and practices, and kind of take it. So here we had very good support from Bramasol and SAP, and Pete was, I think, from 2018, I think we had weekly calls with Pete and to help, and we had Bramasol with us to support us. Amol, you must have heard the name again. He's a very, very famous consultant and shaker here as well. So they helped us as well on this journey, right? Any questions?
Yeah, full retro for 1 year.
Yes.
Not a fun project.
Not a fun project. I agree. Very challenging project timelines.
So I'm assuming based on what you said, you used it for retrospective, going back to 1/1/18.
Yeah. It is a modified retrospective in a way. It was not fully retrospective would have been all the way to 2000. Right. But yeah, for us it was a bit of a challenge, especially around as it's known, we were with Intel and not with Intel, so all that complexity also played out a little bit. So our direction from the management was to go. So yeah, so what are the key scenarios, right? Something that we implemented ourselves and used some of RAR, and so one was the calculation of material rights. So this is a custom solution that we built around material rights. We use a compounding structure to kind of facilitate that between the original hardware sales and software combined with it, right? Multi-year software supports. Multi-entity, multi-scenario, multi-currency scenarios. That is another very challenging scenario that we implemented, and we're still finding issues with that. After so many months of close and all that, I think that is one area that very challenging area again. Custom implementation. Contract combinations. We use the standard mechanism for RAR, but we do have some, of course, McAfeeization of that contract combination, right? There's some logic around how we combine contracts and stuff. Call of order, again, that's, I think everybody has to go through with, some custom there. I know with the recent service pack, feature pack, I think they have some functionality introduced by standard RAR around call of order. If and feature pack 7, yes. So that's something which people can look at as well. Another thing that we really benefited from was to have some custom builds around error logs reporting. The standard SAP RAR logs were not as user friendly to look at, and the IT could get in and figure out using those error logs. But if you hand those error logs over to business, they found it a little complex. So we built some custom reporting, but we use the framework. I mean, we use the existing framework to build a custom kind of output for the user. Challenges, of course, yeah, I spoke about this. It was a retrospective conversion. One of the biggest challenges was reversal of the VF44 posting. So if somebody's planning retrospective, what we have to do is you have to reverse all the 605 postings, because by the time all your 605 postings are done, so you have to reverse all of that and then go to 606, right? So that becomes a massive challenge, something to look at. We had some issues around, of course, during migration. Always you'll see some issues. You can have 3 marks and still we hit something. There was some incorrect SSP load corrections, and again, good support from Bramasol and SAP. We got through that. Data cleanup, of course, it's always a challenge. Recommend all users to look at your data and see how you can, fix that as much as possible. I'm pretty sure it will not get 100% fixed, but hey, try your best to get as clean as possible. Waterfall reporting, I mean, that's something big. That was a big requirement for us, especially from a deferred waterfall report. Business was used to seeing their, hey, what is going to be my revenue schedule, as they say in RAR, right? Over 5 years, 6 years. So again, we used BW to solve that challenge.
I have a question, sir.
Question, Ms. Olin?
Yes. I have a question on the material rights. Did you guys take a estimation methodology where you check it out on day one, or how did you build that into the consideration?
So material right, as in that was kind of mandated by the business, right? So what constitutes a material right is the definition thing that, so there is some compounding involved. So if a hardware is compound with your hardware support, right, services, for 4 or 5 years. So, what is the period? Around that, so if there is compounding logic involved, that is only when we create a material right situation. So it's an additional POV that we create, which is dedicated for material right, which goes over the remaining period. So the existing arrangement remains as it is. It's the material right is extended by the line or by the period, time-based, to what is your material right covenant.
Blended approach for material rights. Blended. I mean, it's not the standard material rights what is provided in RAR product, but it's a workaround solution to meet the requirement, business requirement. We create individual POV for material rights.
All right. So where we are now is successfully closed 2 quarters in 2019, right? So that's pretty good after reclosing all of 2018. So we call ourselves like a 6-quarter close company now, which is great. Taking care of all the reversals of SD RevRec and having RAR post revenue and all that. So it's now becoming a good kind of machinery going with business and IT partnering together. We've also handed over quite a bit to business now. So all our daily processing of RAI collections and month-end postings, etc., video and close has been given to business. They control that, they run it, and we support them as needed as IT. We have reduced number of defects. Yes, I can say that now. We did decide to go live with Service Pack Feature Pack 5, 1.3, right? 1.3 Feature Pack 5. We stopped then. And then we had defects. We had a number of defects, but we purposely did not put in notes, especially because of the dependency that it had. Right? If a note had massive dependencies, we just did not go for those notes. We tried to do it manually, post it, manual corrections, but we did not introduce more complexity around the solution. But now it's getting better with number of. What we're doing now is, yes, we're deploying. Actually, it should be Service Pack 08. Service Pack 08, and then I always get confused with Feature Pack, Service Pack, Feature Pack, Service Pack. But
when you go online, it's always Service
Pack. So we're going with Service Pack 8 tomorrow night, actually. So hopefully, I can run from here and take care of that. Yeah. So that kind of testing went well. We found some issues with our custom code. So you always have to do that with every upgrade. If you have customizations, it pretty much is the main thing we need to focus on from a issues perspective.
What was your deciding factor in wanting to move, other than Pete always tells you to be on the latest and greatest? What made you decide to do it?
So a couple of factors actually. One is resourcing, the resources that we have and the availability of resources. Number 2 is we wanted to use some additional features around. One is the display of your distinct, non-distinct POVs within now. So basically in a different features, the in-flight checks, especially more additional in-flight checks have been introduced. So we wanted to take that in because we really want to make sure that we don't get inconsistencies at the database level. So that is one reason. And also because we have a lot of pipeline around SD development. We didn't want to develop on old code base and want to kind of be at the latest and great, so that we can be stable for a long time from an SD perspective as well. Because as we know, I mean, everything around, changing SD is quite heavily integrated with RAR, right? So we have stabilized and build on the RAR platform that we have. We want to move away from SD RevRec, so eventually get the consumer business out to RAR and see how that goes. And of course, S/4HANA, we're building kind of roadmap around how to get there.
But you'll have to. So you're thinking about, as you move to S4, you will have to move out of SD RevRec. What's your thought process, Parag, on the timing of that? You're doing it ahead of time so that you can get it stabilized and smooth, or what's the thinking?
So at the moment, it's all around when will we make the S4 move, right? It's all dependent on that. I think it's all around, one is that, and second is we also want to kind of see if we can use some kind of hybrid model around, SD RevRec plus, an old system versus, go everything live. And there are no very high level of thoughts at this point. We've not given up, but we know for sure if we have to go with S4, we have to convert consumer business into RAR. on the new revenue. Yeah, all right. And McAfee, as you know, together is power. Yeah, that's our kind of.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, bro. Pete, I think that wraps it up. So why don't you?
Well, anyway, this now is the we're actually almost on time. Just a few more ways. But anyway, thanks everyone for attending online and coming down here to Dallas to participate, especially customers and speakers, Parag and Steve, Bramasol for the support and sponsorship. Our colleagues in Waldorf and Newtown Square for helping present the product updates. We haven't had one of these meetings in a while, so we thought it was good to have a complete one, and luckily Steve could come and Parag could come and present, which was great. Our next meeting, we think, will be in the Bay Area in October. We also have another request for a meeting later in, we think, probably Q4, Q1 in Europe. So anyway, stay tuned. I know Steve's already volunteered to go to Europe, so.
Yeah,
We'll keep it a nice place, maybe. South of France.
I can't go to Waldorf.
So really now this is the time, if there's any questions online, questions in the room, the folks in the room will have a little time to network. We've got this room for another hour, actually a couple hours. But are there any questions online that?
There are a few questions.
Okay, let's see.
I want to take a few of them.
So yeah, I think we're probably better off just copying those and trying to.
Right, so what we'll do is we'll copy these and send them out to the group. Maybe we can post them up onto the JAM site. So if you guys are part of the user group, make sure you do that. The other thing that Pete and I always ask everybody for is what I thought. Well, here's something I thought I observed so much for this time, just in case. So we had Parag and Steve who came, and they come from industries. While they're a little different, they're actually very similar in terms of high volume, high modifications of contracts and other things. For those of you who are interested in other projects, and I look at Susan because I think of, how are we doing it in A&D, or are there other industry areas that people might be interested in as we focus in the high-tech capital of Silicon Valley or others. So use this opportunity, send emails, let us know topics that you want to cover, because that way we can, cover them in subsequent user meetings.
Yep.
One is more like discrete manufacturing. That would be the word. Because also covers, engineering, construction,
right,
and all that. So making project based.
Right.
Yeah. And we should have some more input. Maybe we can share some insights from our favorite friends down in Houston. Schaak? Probably one of the more complex implementations out there. All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
All right, everyone. Thanks. We're going to wrap up.
This is